Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. Do you ever have those experiences just before your brain registers trouble? That's what happened to me the second I spotted that lone footprint at the edge of the river. Just one footprint that led to nothing but darkness. I'm Cole, and I've been a park ranger down here in Rogue River National Forest down in southern Oregon for the past 8 summers. Nobody up here, of course, will ever be forgotten, and Rogue River, it just felt like home the minute I requested a transfer down here. The forest here is thick, old growth, so quiet that city folks would think it was freezing. And this Rogue River, it runs right through here, pure and cold and quick, with curcules from up in the Cascades. It is beautiful country, though it is cruel. Nobody realizes how promptly it can go south out here. It was late September when it happened. That transitional time when summer tourists thin out but before the winter weather rolls in. The forest takes on this quality then, like it's exhaling after months of being trampled by visitors. The air gets crisp, the leaves start turning, and the river runs high and cold. It's my favorite time of year, honestly. The trails are quieter, and you can actually hear yourself think. I was 3 days into a routine patrol circuit when I got the call. My radio crackled to life around 2 p.m., dispatch informing me that a hiker named Drew Parsons had missed his scheduled check-in. He'd registered for a solo backcountry permit 5 days prior, planning to canoe down a section of the Rogue and camp at designated sites along the way. According to his itinerary, he should have exited at Foster Bar that morning. He never showed. Now, missed check-ins aren't always cause for panic. Sometimes, people lose track of time or their plans change. But something about this one felt off from the start. Drew's emergency contact, his sister, had already called twice. She said it wasn't like him. He was meticulous, always on schedule, always checked in, and he knew the area. He'd done this exact route 3 times before. I grabbed my pack and headed toward his last known location, a campsite near Whiskey Creek, about 6 miles upriver from where he was supposed to exit. The trail follows the river for most of the way, winding through old-growth Douglas firs and hemlock, the ground soft with decades of fallen needles. The sound of the river is constant out there, a low rush that becomes white noise after a while. It took me about 2 hours to reach the campsite. The whole hike, I kept scanning for signs, fresh footprints on the trail, gear stashed off the path, anything. But I found nothing until I reached the site itself. Drew's tent was there, still pitched. His gear was arranged neatly inside, sleeping bag rolled up, camp stove clean, water bottles lined up. Everything suggested he'd packed up for the day, but for some reason had left the tent standing. Maybe he'd planned to come back. I checked the bear canister he'd been required to carry. It was properly secured and full of uneaten trail meals. His permits and ID were in a waterproof pouch inside the tent, but no Drew and no canoe. I radioed it in. Dispatch logged the location and started assembling a search team, but it would take hours for them to reach me. In the meantime, I started searching the perimeter. The campsite sat in a small clearing about 30 yards from the river's edge. The ground was soft there, and I found boot prints, size 11 Merrells, leading from the tent down toward the water. I followed them slowly, photographing as I went. That's when I found it, or rather found where it ended. The prints led down a muddy bank to the water's edge, and then there was just one single footprint, perfectly preserved in the mud at the very edge where water met land. The right foot. It was pressed deep, like he'd been standing there for a while, maybe looking at something in the water. And then nothing, no prints leading back, no signs of a struggle, no disturbance in the surrounding mud, just that one print. And beyond it, the river. I stood there staring at it for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. If he'd waded into the water, there should have been more prints leading up to it. If he'd fallen in, there'd be signs of a stumble, maybe drag marks. But this was like he'd stepped to the edge and vanished. The river was running high, but not dangerously so. I could see rocks breaking the surface 20 feet out, and beyond that, the far bank with its tangle of roots and overhanging brush. The water was that particular shade of murky green it gets in autumn, opaque enough that you couldn't see more than a few inches down. I searched up and down the bank for another hour. Nothing. No tracks, no disturbed brush, no pieces of gear. I even waded in up to my knees, probing the bottom with a stick, but the current was strong and the riverbed rocky. If something had gone in there, it was long gone. By the time the search team arrived, it was getting dark. There were 4 of us, me, 2 other rangers, Marcus and Sarah, and a volunteer search and rescue coordinator named Tom. We set up a base at Drew's campsite and started planning our search grid for the morning. "What are we thinking?" Marcus asked, as we huddled around our maps. "He went into the water?" "Maybe," I said. "But it doesn't track. His tent's still up, his gear's still here, and there's only that one print." "Could have been washing something," Sarah offered. "Lost his balance, got swept away." "Without leaving more tracks?" Tom shook his head. "And where's the canoe? If he took it out, we should see signs of launch. Drag marks, disturbed vegetation. Something." We all knew what he wasn't saying. The river had claimed people before. If Drew had gone in and drowned, his body could be miles downstream by now, caught under a log or wedged between rocks where we'd never find it. But usually, there were signs, always signs. That night, we took shifts keeping watch over the camp. I volunteered for the first shift, midnight to 3 a.m. The forest at night is a different world. The daytime sounds, birds and squirrels and the occasional deer, are replaced by a deeper quiet. You hear the river more clearly, and every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves seems amplified. I was sitting on a log near the fire when I heard it. Around 1:30 a.m. A voice, distant but distinct, calling out. It sounded like help, but distorted, like it was coming from underwater or through a tunnel. I grabbed my flashlight and stood up, listening hard. There it was again. Definitely someone calling for help, but the direction was wrong. It was coming from upriver, back toward the trail I'd come in on. The opposite direction from where Drew should have been if he'd floated downstream. I woke Marcus, and we headed toward the sound, our flashlights cutting narrow beams through the darkness. The voice kept calling, always just ahead of us, always the same distance away. We hiked for 20 minutes, moving carefully on the uneven trail, but we never seemed to get any closer. And then it stopped, just like that. Complete silence, except for the river. "The hell was that?" Marcus whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know. We stood there for another 10 minutes listening, but the voice didn't come back. Eventually, we returned to camp, both of us unsettled but trying not to show it. The next morning, we expanded our search. Sarah took the section of river downstream from the camp. Marcus headed upstream. Tom coordinated with dispatch for aerial support, a helicopter that would scan from above. And I went back to that footprint. In daylight, it looked even stranger. The mud around it was undisturbed, like it had been carefully placed there. I photographed it from every angle, even made a cast of it using some plaster from my emergency kit. Something about it bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Around 11 a.m., Sarah radioed in. She'd found something. I met her about a mile downstream where the river widened into a slower section with a small gravel bar on the inside bend. She was standing at the water's edge, staring at something caught in the rocks. It was Drew's canoe, but wrong. So wrong. The canoe was pristine. No damage, no scratches, not even dirty. It sat there on the gravel, perfectly upright, like someone had carefully carried it there and set it down. The paddles were inside, crossed neatly over the seats. There was no water in it. It was completely dry. "I found it like this," Sarah said quietly. "Didn't touch anything." I walked around it slowly. A canoe that had been in the river, that had traveled any distance at all, would show signs. It would be wet, scraped, maybe have debris caught in it. This looked like it had just been cleaned and placed here. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "None of it does," Sarah replied. "If he capsized, where is he? If he didn't capsize, why's the canoe here? And why's it dry?" We radioed it in and waited for Tom and Marcus to arrive. When they did, all four of us just stood there, staring at this impossible canoe. "Maybe he portaged it here," Marcus suggested. "Set it down, went to do something, and then had an accident." "From where?" Tom countered. "The nearest portage trail is 3 miles upriver. And again, where are the tracks, the drag marks?" We searched the area thoroughly. The gravel bar should have shown footprints, disturbances, something. But aside from our own tracks, there was nothing. It was like the canoe had been placed there from above. By evening, we'd expanded the search to a 5-mile radius. More teams had arrived, along with search dogs. The dogs picked up Drew's scent at the campsite and followed it down to that single footprint. And then they lost it. They circled, whined, couldn't pick up the trail. The handler said she'd never seen anything like it. That night was my turn for the late shift again. 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. I was starting to dread it. Around 3 a.m. I heard footsteps. Clear, distinct footsteps on the trail, coming from the direction of the river. My first thought was relief. Maybe it was Drew, finally found. I grabbed my flashlight and called out, "Hello? Drew, is that you?" The footsteps stopped, and in the beam of my flashlight I saw him, or thought I did. A figure standing about 30 yards down the trail, just at the edge of where my light reached. The silhouette was right, height, build, even seemed to be wearing hiking gear. But something about the way it stood, perfectly still, watching me, made my skin crawl. "Drew?" I called again. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there. I started walking toward it, my hand instinctively going to the radio on my belt. But with each step I took forward, the figure seemed to recede, maintaining the same distance. I stopped walking. It stopped moving. I took another step. It moved back. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "If you need help, say something." Still nothing. And then, in a voice that sounded like Drew's but wasn't, not quite, it spoke. "The trail ends at the river." And then it was gone. Not walked away, not ran, just gone, like someone had switched off a light. I stood there, my flashlight shaking in my hand, sweeping the empty trail. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Cole, you okay?" It was Tom. "Thought I heard you talking to someone. I swallowed hard. I thought I saw something. Might have been a deer. Shadow playing tricks." "Get some sleep," Tom said. "Long day tomorrow." But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept replaying what I'd heard. The trail ends at the river. What did that mean? By the third day, the official search was being scaled back. Drew's sister had arrived, and I had to tell her we still had nothing. No body, no clear evidence of what had happened. Just a tent full of gear, a mysterious footprint, and a canoe that shouldn't have been dry. "He knew these woods," she kept saying. "He wouldn't just get lost. Something happened to him." She was right. Something had happened. But what? The search continued for 2 more days, but by then, everyone could feel the shift. What had started as a rescue operation had quietly become a recovery effort. And if I'm being honest, most of us had stopped expecting to find Drew alive. The question now was whether we'd find him at all. On the 4th day, Marcus found something that reignited the investigation. He was searching a section of trail about 2 miles south of the original campsite, an area we'd already covered once but had decided to sweep again. In a patch of soft earth beside the trail, he found boot prints. Size 11 Merrills, just like Drew's. But these prints were different. They weren't heading downriver toward the exit point like you'd expect. They were heading back upriver, toward the deeper wilderness, away from safety. "These are fresh," Marcus said when I arrived. 2, maybe 3 days old, max. I knelt beside them, studying the tread pattern. They matched perfectly with the prints we'd found at the campsite and that lone print at the river's edge. But the stride was off. The steps were too close together, like whoever made them was shuffling or walking very slowly. And they were deep, pressing into the earth with more weight than a normal walking stride would create. "Could be someone else wearing the same boots," Sarah suggested, but even she didn't sound convinced. We followed the trail of prints. They led along the riverbank, sometimes disappearing where the ground got rocky, then reappearing when we found another patch of soft earth. We tracked them for over a mile before they led us somewhere none of us expected. There's a section of the Rogue River that locals don't like to talk about. It doesn't have an official name, but the old-timers call it the Still Pool. It's a natural formation where the river widens into an almost perfect circle, maybe 50 feet across, surrounded by high banks and overhanging trees that block out most of the sunlight. The water there is deep, unnaturally deep, and unlike the rest of the river, it doesn't flow. It just sits there, black and smooth as glass, like something separate from the river entirely. I'd been warned about the Still Pool during my first week on the job. Not officially, nothing in the training manuals, but in that quiet way, rangers pass information to each other over beers. "Don't camp near it," my predecessor had told me, "and if you hear splashing after dark, don't go look." The boot prints led directly to the Still Pool. We stood at the edge, staring down at that black water. The prints went right up to the bank and then stopped at the water's edge. Both feet this time, planted side by side, toes pointing toward the water. And then nothing. "He went in," Marcus said quietly. "Or something made it look like he did," Tom countered. "We need dive support." While Tom radioed for a dive team, I walked the perimeter of the Still Pool. The trees were old here, older than most of the forest, their roots twisted and exposed along the bank like grasping fingers. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of the river that was flowing not 30 yards away. Just this heavy, pressing quiet that made my ears ring. I found something else. On the far side of the pool, wedged between 2 roots, was a yellow stuff sack, the kind you'd use for keeping gear dry in a canoe. It was one of Drew's. I recognized it from the inventory we'd taken of his camp. Inside the stuff sack was his journal. Waterproof, thank God, and still readable. I sat down right there and started flipping through it. The early entries were normal. Drew documenting his trip, noting wildlife sightings, describing the beauty of the river. His handwriting was neat, methodical. But then, starting on the 3rd day, things changed. Day 3. Something followed me last night. Heard it splashing in the water, keeping pace with my camp. Went to look, but couldn't see anything. Water was moving wrong, against the current. Day 4. Saw the footprints again. Just one, always just one, appearing ahead of me on the trail. Same boot print, but it's not mine. Wrong foot, wrong stride. It's like it's trying to lead me somewhere. Day 5. Made it to the still pool. I know I should leave, but I can't. There's something in the water. I can feel it watching me. The trail ends here. Everything ends here. That was the last entry. I looked up from the journal, staring at that black water, and felt something in my stomach turn over. The dive team arrived the next morning. 3 divers, experienced guys who'd done recoveries in rivers before. They geared up while Tom briefed them on what we knew, which wasn't much. We were looking for a body, presumed drowning, in a pool of unknown depth. The first diver went down around 10 a.m. He was under for maybe 5 minutes before he surfaced, his face pale behind his mask. "How deep?" Tom asked. "I don't know," the diver said, and there was something in his voice I didn't like. "I went down 60 feet, didn't find the bottom." 60 feet? Marcus looked at Tom. "That's not possible. The river's only 10, 15 feet deep anywhere else." "I know what I saw," the diver snapped. "It just keeps going down. And there's something else. The water down there, it's moving. Currents going in circles, spiraling down. I've never felt anything like it." The second diver went down with an underwater light and a camera. He was gone longer, maybe 8 minutes. When he surfaced, he wouldn't talk about what he'd seen. Just shook his head, pulled off his gear, and walked away. We never got him back in the water. The third diver was the team leader, a guy named Holt who'd been doing this for 20 years. He went down with more line than the other 2, determined to find the bottom, or at least find evidence of Drew. He was under for 12 minutes. When he finally surfaced, he was swimming fast, almost frantic, and his breathing was ragged. "Pull me out," he gasped. "Get me out now." We hauled him onto the bank, and he ripped off his mask, his hands shaking. Tom asked him what happened, but Holt just kept shaking his head. "It's not right down there," he finally managed. "The water, it's like it's alive. And I saw prints on the bottom, boot prints in the silt, walking in a circle, just going around and around like he was pacing. But they don't lead anywhere. They just loop over and over." "Did you see a body?" I asked. Holt looked at me, and his eyes were full of something I couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe, but mixed with something else. Confusion. Horror. "No," he said. "But I heard something, down there in the dark, breathing. Something was breathing underwater." The dive operation was suspended. Officially, the reason given was safety concerns about the unusual currents. Unofficially, no one was willing to go back in that water. Drew's sister demanded answers we couldn't give her. How could someone just vanish? Where was her brother's body? The only thing we could tell her was what we knew. Drew had made it to the still pool, and he'd never left. The case was eventually classified as presumed drowning, body unrecovered. It happens sometimes in wilderness areas. The forest keeps its secrets. But I kept thinking about that journal entry. The trail ends here. Everything ends here. What did he mean by everything? Over the next few weeks, I couldn't let it go. I started doing research, digging through old ranger reports, talking to longtime locals. What I found disturbed me more than the mystery itself. Drew wasn't the first. In 1987, a fisherman named Harold Myers went missing near the still pool. His truck was found at the trailhead, his gear set up by the water's edge, but Harold was gone, no trace. In '93, 2 hikers, a married couple, were reported missing after camping in the area. Their tent was found collapsed near the pool. Inside, all their belongings were there, including their boots, but the couple had vanished. both of them. In 2001, a park ranger, someone I should have known about but whose files seemed to have been misplaced, was last seen hiking toward the still pool to investigate reports of strange sounds. She never returned. Her flashlight was found at the water's edge. 4 disappearances, all connected to the same location, and yet, somehow, this wasn't common knowledge. The information was buried, scattered across different jurisdictions and reports, never connected into a pattern. I showed my findings to Tom. He looked over the documents I'd compiled and his face went gray. "You can't show this to anyone else," he said. "Why not? People need to know." "Know what? That there's some kind of—" "What? What are you saying, Cole? That the water's haunted? That the forest is eating people?" He pushed the papers back across the table. "You file this as an official report, they'll pull you off active duty. Maybe suggest some therapy. This job is hard enough without rumors making it harder." He was right, but that didn't make it easier. I was supposed to protect people, but how could I do that when I didn't even understand the danger? Or I should have let it go. Filed my report, moved on to the next patrol, let the forest swallow this mystery like it had swallowed Drew. But I couldn't. Because 3 weeks after the official search ended, something happened that made it impossible to ignore. I was off duty, staying at my cabin about 10 miles from the ranger station, when I got a call at 2 a.m. It was Marcus. "You need to come in," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Right now. What happened? Just come, please." I made it to the station in 20 minutes. Marcus was there with Sarah and 2 local police officers. On the desk between them was a backpack, caked in mud and dried river weed. "Hiker found it this morning on the bank, about 5 miles downstream from the still pool," Marcus said. "It's Drew's." I stared at the pack. It was the same one that had been missing from his campsite, but that wasn't what made my blood run cold. "It's wet," Sarah said quietly. "Still wet, like it just came out of the water. But Cole, Drew went missing 3 weeks ago." I opened the pack carefully. Inside were the things Drew had presumably taken with him the day he disappeared. A water bottle, a first aid kit, a map sealed in a waterproof case. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag, was something that shouldn't have been there, a Polaroid photograph. The image was dark, taken with a flash in what looked like a cave or tunnel. In the center of the frame was the still pool, but shot from an angle I'd never seen before. Like the photographer had been standing in the water, looking up at the bank. And there, at the edge, was a figure. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall or too thin. Standing perfectly still. Written on the white border of the Polaroid, in handwriting that looked like Drew's but more frantic, more desperate, were 3 words. "It wants more." "What the hell does that mean?" one of the officers asked. None of us answered. Because I think, deep down, we all knew. The next day, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went back to the still pool. Alone. I had to see it again. Had to try to understand. It was late afternoon when I arrived, the light filtering through the trees at that golden angle that makes everything look softer than it is. The pool was exactly as I remembered, that circle of black water sitting impossibly still while the river rushed past not 30 feet away. I sat on the bank, Drew's journal open in my lap, rereading his final entries. Something followed me last night. I'd heard those splashing sounds too, hadn't I? The night of the search. The trail ends here, those boot prints we'd followed, all leading to this one spot. I looked at the water, really looked at it, trying to see what Drew had seen. What had made him stay when he should have run? That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. The trees surrounding the pool, those ancient giants with their twisted roots, they were all leaning. Every single one was tilted slightly inward, like they were bowing toward the water. Or maybe like they were trying to pull away, but couldn't. I stood up and walked along the edge, studying the ground. And then I found them. More boot prints, but these were different. They weren't Drew's size 11 Merrells. They were smaller, women's hiking boots maybe size 7, and they were arranged in the same pattern Holt had described seeing underwater. A circle, just endlessly looping around the pool's edge. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Cole, you there?" It was Tom. "Where are you?" "At the pool," I said, not seeing any point in lying. There was a long pause, then, "Get out of there, now. We found something." "What did you find?" "Just get back to the station. That's an order." I took one last look at that dark water and left. On the hike back, I kept feeling like something was following me. Not footsteps exactly, but a presence. That feeling you get when you know you're being watched. I walked faster, my hand on the bear spray at my belt even though I knew it wouldn't help against whatever this was. At the station, Tom had spread out a series of topographical maps on the table. He pointed to the still pool's location. "I had a geologist friend look at these," he said. Asked him about the depth readings from the dive team. He said it's impossible. The geological surveys show solid bedrock at 30 feet. So, the divers were wrong? No, I believe them. I think they went down 60 feet. But according to every survey, map, and geological study we have, there shouldn't be anything there but rock. I stared at the maps. "So, what are you saying? The pool isn't supposed to exist?" "I'm saying the still pool shouldn't be there. The geological formation, the depth, the way it stays separate from the river current. None of it makes sense." Tom looked at me, and I saw the same fear I felt reflected in his eyes. It's like something made a hole in the world, and the forest just grew around it. Over the next week, 2 more hikers reported strange experiences near the still pool. One said she heard someone calling her name from the water. Another said he saw boot prints appearing on the trail ahead of him, one at a time, like invisible footsteps marking a path. Tom made a decision. He closed the entire section of forest around the still pool, citing erosion and safety concerns. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would keep people away for now. The official file on Drew Parsons was marked as closed, cause of death listed as presumed accidental drowning, but I couldn't close the file in my mind. I kept thinking about that Polaroid, about the figure standing at the water's edge, about Drew's final words in his journal. One night, I had a dream. I was standing at the edge of the still pool, and Drew was there in the water, treading in place, his head just above the surface. He was looking at me with eyes that were too dark, too empty. "You should have warned me," he said. "The trail ends at the river, but it doesn't stop there." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It goes down," he said. "It keeps going down. And down there, in the dark, there's something waiting. It's been waiting a long time, and it's still hungry." The water began to rise around him, slowly swallowing him. He didn't fight it, didn't even seem to notice. He just kept staring at me. "Don't follow the prints," he said, as the water reached his chin. "Don't follow the voices. Don't—" The water covered his face, and he was gone. The pool went still again, black and smooth as glass. And then I saw them, faces just beneath the surface, dozens of them, all staring up at me with those same empty eyes. I woke up gasping, covered in cold sweat. It was 3 a.m. My cabin was dark except for the moonlight coming through the window, and from somewhere outside I heard it. Splashing. something moving through water. But I was 10 miles from the river. There was no water near my cabin except the small creek that ran behind the property, and that was barely a foot deep. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window. The backyard was silver in the moonlight, my small dock extending 10 feet out over the creek. And at the end of the dock, standing perfectly still, was a figure. Even from 50 feet away, even in the dark, I knew who it was. I recognized the build, the yellow raincoat, the morale boots. Drew was standing on my dock, dripping wet, staring at my cabin. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. I watched as he raised one arm, pointing, not at me, but past me, toward something behind. I spun around, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the dock, he was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my kitchen with every light on, my service weapon on the table in front of me, even though I knew it wouldn't help. You can't shoot a ghost. You can't arrest the darkness. At dawn, I went out to the dock. The wood was dry. No wet footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. But when I looked down at the creek, I saw something that made my stomach turn. A single boot print in the mud at the water's edge. Size 11, right foot. I put in for a transfer the next day. Cited family reasons, need for a change, burnout. Tom approved it without question. I think he understood. Maybe he'd had his own experiences he wasn't talking about. My last day at Rogue River National Forest was in late November. I did one final patrol of my section, deliberately avoiding the closed area around the still pool. As I was heading back to the station, I passed a couple setting up camp near the river. They looked young, maybe mid-20s, eager and excited about their wilderness adventure. "Stay away from the still pool," I told them. "The area's closed, but even once it reopens, stay away." They looked confused. "Why? Is it dangerous?" I thought about Drew, about Harold Myers and the missing couple, and the ranger whose name I'd never learned, about all the boot prints leading to dark water and the faces staring up from below. "The trail ends at the river," I said. "But some things don't stop there. They keep going down, and you don't want to find out what's at the bottom." They laughed, probably thinking I was being overdramatic or trying to scare them with ranger folklore. I didn't blame them. If someone had told me that story a year ago, I wouldn't have believed it either. But now I know better. Now I know that some places in the forest are hungry. Some trails lead to things that shouldn't exist, and some waters run deeper than any map can show. I transferred to a park in Arizona, desert country where the dangers are visible and make sense. Rattlesnakes and heat stroke and getting lost in the canyons. Real dangers you can prepare for, fight against, survive. I never went back to Rogue River. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the splashing. I still see that single footprint at the water's edge. And sometimes, in my dreams, I'm standing at the still pool, watching the surface, waiting for something to rise. The official file says Drew Parsons drowned in a tragic accident, that his body was never recovered due to the dangerous currents and deep water. The case is closed, but I know the truth. Drew didn't drown, he followed something down into that impossible depth, down to where the light doesn't reach and the water moves in ways it shouldn't. He went looking for answers and found something that had been waiting there long before the forest grew, long before the river flowed. Something that's still waiting, still hungry. The trail ends at the river. But for Drew, and for all the others, it didn't stop there. It kept going down. And maybe, somewhere in that darkness, they're still walking, following those ghostly boot prints in circles, unable to find their way back to the light. Every few months I check the incident reports from Rogue River, just to see, just to know. And last week, I saw a new one, a solo hiker overdue from a backcountry trip. Last known location, near Whiskey Creek. His campsite was found intact, gear still there. His canoe was discovered downstream, dry and undamaged, and at the water's edge, they found a single boot print. Size 12, left foot. It's happening again. I thought about calling Tom, about warning someone. But what would I say? That the forest has a hunger? That some places in the wilderness are doorways to something we don't understand? That the still pool is still feeding? They'd never believe me. Just like I didn't believe the old-timers who tried to warn me. Just like those young campers didn't believe me when I told them to stay away. The cycle continues. The forest keeps its secrets. And somewhere in the darkness beneath that black water, something waits for the next person to follow the trail to its end. I don't go into the wilderness anymore unless I have to. And when I do, I avoid rivers. I avoid still water. I avoid anywhere that's too quiet, too empty, too perfect. Because I learned something out there in Rogue River, something that every ranger knows but nobody wants to say out loud. The forest doesn't care about you. It existed long before you, and it'll exist long after. You're not the explorer, you're not the adventurer, you're not the master of this domain. You're just passing through. And if you're not careful, if you follow the wrong trail or wade too deep into the wrong water, you might find out that some passages only go one way. The trail ends at the river. But what's beneath the river? What's at the bottom of that impossible depth? I don't know. And I never want to find out. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about Drew standing on my dock, dripping wet, pointing at something I couldn't see, warning me, or maybe inviting me. The still pool is still there, still waiting, still hungry. And every time someone goes missing near those waters, I wonder if they heard it too. That voice calling from below, promising answers, promising peace, promising an end to the questions. Don't follow the voices. Don't follow the prints. Don't trust the water when it's too still, too black, too deep. Because some trails end at the river, but others just keep going down. You know that feeling when something's wrong but you can't quite put your finger on it? When every instinct you have is screaming at you to turn around and walk away, but your training tells you to push forward? That's where I found myself on a cold October night in the Rogue River National Forest, listening to a voice that was coming from a direction that made absolutely no sense. My name is Eliza Hartley, and I've been a park ranger here in Southern Oregon for the past 6 years. Before that, I spent 3 years doing search and rescue work up in the Cascades, so I'm no stranger to the woods or to finding people who don't want to stay found. I've pulled hypothermic hikers out of ravines, tracked lost children through miles of dense forest, and talked down more than one person who decided the wilderness was a good place to end things. I thought I'd seen everything these forests could throw at me. I was wrong. The Rogue River National Forest is over 1 million acres of some of the most beautiful and unforgiving terrain in the Pacific Northwest. Dense, old-growth forests, steep ravines, the Rogue River itself cutting through it all like a vein of cold, fast-moving water. The trees here are ancient, Douglas firs and western hemlocks that were saplings when Lewis and Clark were mapping the continent. When you're deep in these woods, especially at night, the forest canopy is so thick that even a full moon barely penetrates. You're in a world of shadows and sounds, where your flashlight beam is the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. October is my favorite time of year to work these trails. The summer crowds have thinned out, the fall colors are at their peak, and there's this particular quality to the air, crisp and clean, with just a hint of wood smoke from distant campfires. The forest feels like it's taking a deep breath before winter sets in. Most of the casual hikers are gone by then, leaving only the serious backpackers and the hunters who know what they're doing. That particular week, I was partnered with Paige Sullivan. She'd transferred in from Crater Lake National Park about 4 months earlier, and we'd hit it off immediately. Paige was maybe 27, 28, with that lean, wiry build that comes from spending most of your life outdoors. She had this way of reading terrain that was almost supernatural. Give her a topographic map in 5 minutes, and she could tell you the best route, where water sources would be, where someone was likely to get turned around. She was also one of the few people I'd met who could match my pace on the trail without complaining. We were 3 days into a week-long patrol of the backcountry campsites along the Rogue River Trail. It's a routine work, mostly checking on the designated sites, making sure nobody's left trash, verifying that bare canisters are being used properly, that sort of thing. We'd been making good time, averaging about 10 miles a day, stopping at each campsite to log conditions and check in with any campers we encountered. Wednesday started out normal enough. We'd spent the night at Campsite 12, one of the established ranger camps with a bear box and a decent fire ring. The morning was foggy, typical for October along the river, with the mist rising off the water and creating these ethereal columns of white that wound between the trees. We broke camp around 7 a.m., had a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and terrible instant coffee, and hit the trail by 8. The plan was to check campsites 13 through 16, then make our way to campsite 19 for the night. It was an easy day, maybe 8 miles total, nothing challenging. We took our time, enjoying the scenery, stopping to identify some mushrooms growing on a fallen log, watching a black bear and her cub forage on the opposite bank of the river. Around 4 p.m., we were just finishing up our inspection of Campsite 12 when Paige's radio crackled to life. It was dispatch, Sarah Rodriguez, her voice coming through with that particular tone that meant something had gone wrong. Ranger Hartley, Ranger Sullivan, we've got a situation. Hikers David and Lisa Martinez, permit number 7734, missed their checkout time. Last known location was Campsite 19. Husband called from the trailhead saying his wife went ahead this morning to get the car but never arrived. He's been trying her cell for the past 6 hours, straight to voicemail. I grabbed at my radio. Copy that, dispatch. What's the timeline? Wife left their camp around 8 a.m. this morning. It's a 4-mile hike from Campsite 19 to the trailhead parking lot. Even at a slow pace, she should have been there by 10:30 at the latest. No sign of her, no car's been moved. Paige was already pulling out her map, tracing the route with her finger. She looked up at me and mouthed, 2 hours, meaning that's how long it would take us to hike from our current position to Campsite 19. We're at Campsite 12, I radioed back. We can be at 19 by 6 p.m., maybe 6:30 depending on trail conditions. What's the weather looking like? Clear tonight, low around 40 degrees, but we've got fog rolling in along the river. Visibility's going to be shit after sundown. Understood. We're moving out now. Has anyone called for additional support? On standby. We've got 2 more rangers ready to deploy if this turns into a full search. For now, you 2 are closest. Check in when you reach the site. Copy that. I clipped the radio back on my belt and looked at Paige. She was already repacking her gear, moving with practiced efficiency. We both knew what missing hiker reports usually meant. Best case scenario, Lisa had taken a wrong turn, maybe twisted an ankle, was sitting somewhere on the trail waiting for help. Worst case, well, there were a lot of worst cases in a forest like this. Falls, animal attacks, medical emergencies, exposure. Or sometimes people just walked off into the woods and never came back. What's your read? Paige asked as we shouldered our packs. Too early to tell. Could be anything. But 6 hours overdue on a straightforward trail, that's concerning. Yeah. And the phone going straight to voicemail. Dead battery or no signal. Could be either. We get spotty coverage out here, especially down in the valleys. I checked my own phone. One bar, barely hanging on. Let's move. We're burning daylight. We set a hard pace, covering ground quickly. The trail from campsite 12 to 19 follows the river for most of the way, winding through stands of old-growth forest where the trees are so tall and so close together that the trail feels like a tunnel. The sound of the river is constant. That white noise rush of water over rocks that becomes so familiar you stop noticing it. Except when you're searching for someone, every sound becomes significant. Every snapped branch might be a signal. Every distant bird call might be a whistle. We made it to campsite 19 by 6:15, just as the sun was starting to set. The campsite was in a small clearing about 30 yards from the river, tucked into a grove of massive cedars, and everything was wrong from the moment we arrived. The tent was still standing, which was the first red flag. If Lisa had packed up and left that morning like her husband said, why was the tent still pitched? David Martinez was there, sitting on a log by the fire ring, his head in his hands. When he heard us approaching, he looked up, and I could see the fear and confusion on his face. "Thank God," he said, standing up quickly. "You're rangers. They said someone was coming." "I'm Ranger Hartley. This is Ranger Sullivan," I said, dropping my pack. "You're David Martinez?" Yes, my wife Lisa, she's missing. She left this morning and she never came back, and I don't understand what's happening." "Okay, Mr. Martinez, I need you to take a breath and walk me through exactly what happened. Start from the beginning." David nodded, running a hand through his hair. He was maybe mid-40s, in good shape, wearing quality hiking gear. Not your typical novice who gets in over their head. "We've been camping for 3 days," he said. "Everything was great. No problems. This morning, we were supposed to pack up and hike out. Lisa said she wanted to get an early start, warm up the car, maybe stop in town for breakfast before we drove home. So she left around 8, said she'd see me at the parking lot in a couple hours. I stayed behind to break down camp, clean up. Took me maybe an hour and a half. When I got to the parking lot around 10:30, she wasn't there. Car was still locked. I figured maybe she'd stopped to take photos or something. She does that. But then noon rolled around, then 1, then 2, and I'm calling her phone, and it's just going to voicemail. That's when I called you guys. Had she been acting unusual at all? Sick? Disoriented? Anything out of the ordinary? No, nothing. She was happy, excited to be out here. She knows these trails. We've hiked this area before. This was supposed to be an easy trip. Paige had been circling the campsite, examining the ground. "Mr. Martinez, you said you broke down camp. Where's the tent?" David looked confused. "What? The tent's right." He turned around and stopped. The tent was still standing, stakes still in the ground, rainfly still attached. That's not right. I packed that up. I know I packed it up. It was in my pack when I hiked out." I felt that first cold finger of unease trace down my spine. "You're sure?" "I'm positive. I collapsed it, rolled it up, stuffed it in my pack. I remember doing it, but it's—" He walked toward the tent, reaching out to touch it like he needed physical confirmation it was real. "How is it here?" Paige caught my eye. We were both thinking the same thing. Either David was confused, maybe shock setting in, or something very strange was going on. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "Let's focus on finding Lisa. Did she take any gear with her? Phone, GPS, emergency supplies?" "Yeah, she had her day pack. Phone, whistle, bear spray, first aid kit, water, snacks, all the basics. And she's experienced. She's been hiking since she was a kid." "Which trail did she take?" "The main one, straight back to the trailhead. Same way we came in." That was good. The trail from Campsite 19 to the trailhead parking lot was well maintained and clearly marked. 4 miles, relatively flat, no confusing junctions. You'd have to actively try to get lost. "We're going to start a search," I told David. "I need you to stay here at the campsite in case she comes back. Can you do that?" He nodded, but I could see the resistance in his eyes. He wanted to search, wanted to do something, anything, but having him blunder around in the woods in the dark would just create a second person for us to worry about. Paige had pulled out her GPS unit and was marking waypoints. "We should split up," she said quietly. "Cover more ground. One of us takes the trail to the trailhead. The other does a parallel sweep through the woods on the riverside." "No," I said immediately. "We don't split up. Not yet. Not until we have a better idea what we're dealing with. Eliza, we're losing light. If she's injured somewhere, every minute counts." She was right, but my instincts were screaming at me not to separate. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The tent that shouldn't be standing. An experienced hiker vanishing on an easy trail in broad daylight. "We'll sweep the trail together," I said. "Quick pass to the trailhead and back. If we don't find her, we call in additional support and set up a proper grid search at first light." Paige didn't look happy, but she nodded. "Your call." We grabbed our headlamps and flashlights, told David to stay put and keep his radio on, and headed out on the trail. The sun had set by then, and the forest had taken on that deep blue twilight quality that comes just before full darkness. Our lights cut through the gloom in narrow beams, catching the white trail markers on the trees every 50 yards or so. "Lisa!" I called out as we walked. "Lisa Martinez, this is the Park Service. Can you hear me?" Nothing but the sound of the river and our boots on the trail. We walked slowly, scanning both sides of the path with our lights, looking for any sign that someone had stepped off into the underbrush. Broken branches, scuff marks, anything. The trail was well used, packed dirt in most places, but we found what we were looking for about half a mile from the campsite. Boot prints. Fresh ones, heading in the right direction toward the trailhead. Women's hiking boots, smaller than mine, probably a size 7 or 8. The tread pattern was clear in a patch of soft dirt beside the trail. "That's gotta be her," Paige said, kneeling down to examine the prints. "Made this morning, judging by the sharpness of the edges. No rain to blur them, no animal tracks crossing over. Okay, so she was on the trail, heading the right direction." I felt a small measure of relief. At least we had a confirmed direction of travel. "Let's keep moving." We followed the trail, finding more boot prints every few hundred yards. Always heading toward the trailhead, always on the path. No signs of trouble, no indication she'd stumbled or fallen. Just a steady, normal walking pace. Then, about 2 miles from the campsite, the boot prints stopped. Not gradually, not like she'd stepped onto a rocky section where prints wouldn't show. They just stopped. The last print was in a patch of damp earth beside the trail. A clear left boot impression, mid-stride. And after that, nothing. The trail continued. Packed dirt that should have shown prints, but there was nothing but the marks from other hikers. Older impressions that had been there for days. "The hell?" Paige said, sweeping her light back and forth. "Where did she go?" I was searching the edges of the trail, looking for any sign that Lisa had stepped off into the forest. But the underbrush was undisturbed. No broken branches, no trampled ferns, no sign of passage. "She didn't leave the trail here," I said. "These plants haven't been touched. So, where are her prints?" I didn't have an answer. We searched the area for 20 minutes, widening our circle, looking for any indication of where Lisa had gone. Nothing. That's when we heard it. "Help! Somebody help me!" A woman's voice, distant but clear, desperate and scared. and it was coming from ahead of us, deeper into the trail toward the parking lot. "Lisa!" Paige shouted, already moving. "Lisa Martinez! We're park rangers, keep calling out!" We jogged forward, our lights bouncing, calling out every few seconds. The voice came again, the same words, the same desperate tone. "Help me! Please!" "We're coming!" I yelled. "Keep making noise, we'll find you!" We ran for maybe 200 yards, and then the trail opened up into a small clearing where a massive fallen tree had created a natural bench. We stopped, breathing hard, sweeping our lights around. The clearing was empty. "Lisa!" Paige called. "Where are you?" Silence. Complete absolute silence. Even the river seemed muted, like the forest was holding its breath. "She was just—" Paige started, then stopped. "We just heard her. She should be right here." I was turning slowly, my light moving over the trees, the trail, the fallen log. And then I heard it again, but this time the voice was behind us, back toward the campsite. "Help! Please! Somebody!" Paige and I looked at each other. The same voice, the same exact intonation, but now it was coming from the direction we'd just come from. "That's not possible," Paige whispered. "There's no way she got past us. We've been on the trail the whole time." My radio crackled. "Hartley, Sullivan, do you copy?" I grabbed it. "This is Hartley. Go ahead." "It's dispatch. We've got a weird situation. Just got a call from a motorist on Highway 62, about 10 miles from the trailhead parking lot. Says they saw a woman matching Lisa Martinez's description standing on the side of the road, but when they pulled over to ask if she needed help, she was gone. Any chance your missing hiker made it to the road? 10 miles from the trailhead. Impossible. Even if Lisa had somehow gotten off the trail and cut through the forest, there was no way she could have covered that distance in the time frame. Negative, dispatch. We're tracking her on the trail between campsite 19 and the trailhead. We have confirmed boot prints and we're hearing calls for help, but we can't locate the source." There was a pause. "Say again? You're hearing calls for help but can't locate the subject." "That's affirmative." "The voice appears to be moving. It was ahead of us. Now it's behind us." Another pause. Longer this time. "Copy that. We're sending additional units. Tom and Marcus are gearing up now, should be at your location in 90 minutes. Sarah's coordinating with County Search and Rescue. Stay on the trail and keep attempting contact." "Roger that." I clipped the radio back and looked at Paige. She had her GPS out, staring at the screen. "What?" I asked. "I've been marking every location where we've heard the voice," she said slowly. 4 times now, all different locations. "But Eliza, look at the pattern." She showed me the screen. 4 waypoints scattered along the trail, all within a 2-mile radius. But when you connected them, they formed a rough circle, and we were standing right in the center. "She's not ahead of us or behind us," Paige said quietly. "She's circling us." The temperature had dropped noticeably, and fog was starting to roll in from the river, thick white tendrils curling between the trees. Our flashlight beams seemed to bounce off the moisture in the air, creating these halos of light that made visibility even worse. The forest had gone quiet in that unnatural way that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "We need to call this in," I said, pulling out my radio again. "This isn't a standard search anymore." Before I could key the mic, we heard the voice again. But this time, it wasn't calling for help. It was closer, much closer, maybe 50 yards away, and it was speaking in a normal tone, like someone having a casual conversation. "Should have turned back at the river. I told you we should have turned back." The voice trailed off into silence. Paige had gone perfectly still beside me, her hand on her bear spray. "That didn't sound like someone in distress," she whispered. "No, it didn't." We stood there listening, our lights sweeping the darkness. And then the voice came again from a completely different direction, and this time there were multiple voices. A woman and a man having a conversation we could only hear fragments of. The trails changed. Not the same trees. How many times have we passed that rock? The voices faded, overlapping and echoing in ways that made no sense. Sound doesn't work like that in a forest. It absorbs into the trees and the soil. It doesn't carry and echo like we were in a canyon. "What the hell is this?" Paige's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. "I don't know, but we're getting out of this area now." We started back toward the campsite, moving quickly but carefully, keeping our lights on the trail. I was trying to make sense of what we were hearing, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe there were other hikers out here, their voices carrying strangely through the fog. Maybe Lisa had met up with someone and they were lost together. Maybe the terrain was creating some kind of acoustic anomaly, but none of those explanations felt right. We were about halfway back to the campsite when Paige grabbed my arm, stopping me. "Look," she hissed, pointing her light ahead. The beam illuminated the trail in front of us, and I saw what had caught her attention. Boot prints. Fresh boot prints. But these weren't leading toward the trailhead or back to camp. These were going perpendicular to the trail, directly into the forest, into an area where the underbrush was dense and tangled. "Those weren't here when we came through," Paige said. She was right. We'd passed this exact spot not 20 minutes ago. The trail had been clear. I moved closer, kneeling to examine the prints. Same boot pattern we'd been following. Same size, Lisa's prints. But the spacing was wrong, the depth was wrong. These weren't the prints of someone walking. They were too far apart, too deep, like someone had been running or jumping. "She went off trail here," I said, standing up. "Recently. These are fresh." "Eliza, that's not possible. We've been on this trail the whole time. We would have seen her. We would have heard her." "I know, but the prints don't lie." I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Hartley. We have fresh tracks leading off trail, approximately 1 mile south of campsite 19. We're going to follow them. Be advised, we're experiencing some unusual acoustic phenomena. Voices coming from multiple directions. Can't confirm if it's our missing hiker or other parties in the area." "Copy that, Hartley. Additional units are 30 minutes out. Use caution." Paige had already started into the underbrush, following the boot prints. I hurried to catch up, pushing branches aside, ducking under low-hanging limbs. The prints were clear in the soft forest floor, leaves pressed deep into the damp earth, heading in a straight line away from the trail. We followed them for maybe 50 yards, and then they just stopped again, same as before, mid-stride, in the middle of an open space between trees. The last print, a right boot, pressed deep. And then nothing. "This doesn't make any sense," Paige said, frustration clear in her voice. "Prints don't just disappear. People don't just disappear." I was sweeping my light around looking for any explanation. And that's when I saw it. About 20 feet ahead, barely visible through the fog and the trees, a shape, human-sized, standing perfectly still. "There," I said quietly, pointing. We approached slowly, calling out. "Lisa? Lisa Martinez? This is the Park Service. Are you okay?" The shape didn't move, didn't respond. As we got closer, my light illuminated it more clearly, and I felt my stomach drop. It was a tree. Just a tree. But the way the branches had grown, the way the bark had formed, it looked exactly like a person standing with their arms at their sides. In the fog and the darkness, The resemblance was uncanny. Jesus, Paige breathed. I really thought. Yeah, me too. We stood there for a moment, trying to calm our racing hearts, and that's when we heard it again. The voice. But this time it was different. Eliza? Paige? Can you hear me? It was David Martinez. His voice coming from our right, from the direction of the river. He sounded panicked, desperate. Help! Rangers, something's wrong. She's here, but she's not here. You have to come back. David, I shouted. Stay at the campsite. We're coming. But even as I said it, something felt wrong. David's voice had been too clear, too close. He should have been half a mile away at the campsite. There was no way his voice should carry this clearly through the dense forest. That's not him, Paige said suddenly. Listen to it. Really listen. The voice came again. Help! She's here! You have to come back! Paige was right. Something was off about the voice. The words were David's. The panic sounded real. But there was a quality to it that was wrong, like a recording being played back at slightly the wrong speed. We're not following that, I said. We're getting back to the trail, back to the actual campsite, and we're waiting for backup. Agreed. We started back toward the trail, moving carefully, keeping our lights on the ground to follow our own tracks back out. But something was different. The forest had changed. I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was wrong, but the trees seemed wrong, too close together. The spacing was off. Paige, are we going the right way? She had her GPS out, frowning at the screen. According to this, the trail should be right ahead, maybe 50 feet. But we walked 50 feet and there was no trail. We walked another 50 feet. Still no trail. Just endless forest, trees and underbrush and fog. The GPS has to be wrong, I said. We didn't come this far. It's not wrong. Look at the track log. We came straight in. We should be going straight back out. She looked up from the screen, and I could see the fear in her eyes now. Real fear. Eliza, where's the trail? I pulled out my own GPS, checked our position. According to the satellite signal, we were 50 feet north of the trail. It should be right in front of us. But there was nothing but forest. Okay, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. We're not panicking. The GPS could be off because of the tree cover. We're going to pick a direction and walk until we hit the trail or the river. We know the trail parallels the river. We can't miss both. Which direction? I oriented myself, trying to remember the layout. West. The river's to the west. We head west, we'll hit water, then we follow the water until we find the trail. We started walking, using the compass on my GPS to keep us oriented. The fog was getting thicker, and our lights were almost useless now, just creating glowing spheres of white that illuminated nothing. I kept expecting to hear the sound of the river, that constant rush of water over rocks. But the forest stayed silent. We walked for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 minutes. And then, finally, I heard it. Water. The rogue river somewhere ahead. Thank God, Paige muttered. We pushed forward, and the forest opened up onto the riverbank. But something was wrong. The river we were looking at wasn't the rogue. It couldn't be. The rogue was maybe 30, 40 feet wide in this section, moving fast but manageable. What we were seeing was at least 100 feet across, the water black and still as glass, not moving at all. That's not the river, Paige said. No, it's not. So where are we? I didn't have an answer. I pulled out my radio, keyed the mic. Dispatch, this is Hartley. We have a problem. We've lost the trail. GPS is showing conflicting information. We're at what appears to be a body of water, but it's not consistent with the Rogue River. Request assistance. Static, then more static, then nothing. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Nothing. I tried again. And again, the radio was working. I could hear it, but I wasn't getting any response. Like we were out of range, which was impossible. We should have been 2 miles from the ranger station at most. "Try yours," I told Paige. She did, with the same results. Static and silence. "Cell phones?" she suggested. I pulled mine out. No signal, not even a little. Paige's showed the same. We stood on the bank of that impossible black water, in a forest that didn't quite match the one we'd entered, and I felt something I'd never felt before in all my years in the wilderness. Not fear, exactly, but something deeper. A fundamental sense that we were somewhere we shouldn't be, somewhere the rules didn't work the same way. "We need to mark our location," I said, pulling out my knife. "Blaze this tree so we know we've been here." I carved a deep X into the bark of the nearest cedar, then added our initials and the date. Basic woodcraft, the kind of thing you do when you're lost and might be walking in circles. "Now what?" Paige asked. "Now we follow this shoreline. Keep the water on our right. Eventually, we'll either find the real river or we'll loop back to where we started. And if we don't, one problem at a time." We started walking, staying close to the water's edge. The fog was so thick now I could barely see Paige, even though she was only 3 feet away. Our lights were almost useless, just diffuse glows in the white. I kept one hand on my bear spray, though I didn't think bear spray would help against whatever we were dealing with. We walked for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was. Maybe it was 10 minutes. Time felt strange here, elastic and unreliable. And then I saw something that made me stop dead. A tree with a carved X. Our initials, today's date. "No," Paige said. "No, we didn't loop back. We've been following the shore. We couldn't have looped back." But there it was. The same tree, the same marks. We'd walked in a circle. "Okay," I said, and I heard my voice shaking now. "Okay, we're going to try something different. We're going to go inland, away from the water, find high ground, get our bearings. Eliza, I don't think we're in the right forest anymore." "What are you talking about?" "I think we're somewhere else. I don't know how, I don't know why, but this isn't the Rogue River National Forest, this is somewhere else. That's not possible. Forests don't just change. We didn't fall through a portal or step into another dimension. We're lost, that's all. We're disoriented and we're lost, and once we get our bearings, we'll figure this out." But even as I said it, I knew she was right. This wasn't the forest we'd entered. The trees were wrong, the spacing was wrong, the water was wrong, and somewhere out there in the fog, walking in circles, was Lisa Martinez, or something that used to be Lisa Martinez. We started inland, moving away from that black water, and that's when we heard them again. The voices. But this time there were dozens of them, all talking at once, overlapping, creating a cacophony that made my head hurt. "Help me. The trail changed. I can't find my way back. Please, I've been walking for days. Where's my husband?" The trees moved. Paige grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard. "Those are all different people. Eliza, those are all different lost hikers." She was right. Different voices, different ages, different levels of panic. All lost, all calling for help, all walking in circles in this wrong forest that existed somewhere beside our world. "Lisa!" I shouted into the fog. "Lisa Martinez, can you hear me? My name is Eliza Hartley. I'm a park ranger. You need to listen to my voice and walk toward it. Follow my voice." "Eliza, what are you doing?" "If she's in here, if she's lost in this place, maybe she can use us as a beacon. Maybe she can find her way to us." I kept calling over and over, hoping that somewhere in this labyrinth of fog and wrong trees, Lisa would hear me and follow. Hoping that we could pull her back to reality, or pull ourselves back, or find some way out of this nightmare. And then, through the fog, I saw movement, a shape, human-sized, coming toward us. "Lisa?" I called. "Is that you?" The shape kept coming, resolving into a clearer silhouette. A woman, medium height, wearing hiking gear. She was walking slowly, mechanically, her arms hanging at her sides. "Lisa Martinez?" I said again, moving toward her. She stopped about 10 feet away, and in the beam of my flashlight I finally saw her face. It was Lisa. I recognized her from the photo David had shown us. But something was terribly wrong. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing. Her face was expressionless, slack, and she was soaking wet, water streaming from her hair and clothes, dripping onto the ground in steady rivulets. But we hadn't seen any rain, and that black water we'd found was still, flat as glass. "Lisa," I said gently, approaching slowly like she was a spooked animal. "Lisa, my name is Eliza. I'm here to help you. Can you hear me?" She didn't respond, didn't blink, just stood there, water pooling at her feet. "Lisa, where have you been? Do you know where you are?" Still nothing. I reached out slowly, carefully, and touched her shoulder. She was ice cold, so cold my fingers went numb from the brief contact. And the moment I touched her, she spoke. "The trail ends at the water," she said in a flat, emotionless voice. "The trail ends at the water. The trail ends at the water." She kept repeating it, the same words in the same tone, like a recording stuck on repeat. "Lisa, where's the trail? Can you show us the trail?" Without warning, she turned and started walking. Not toward us, not away from us, but perpendicular into the fog. Paige and I exchanged a glance and followed. Lisa walked with that same mechanical gait, never slowing, never speeding up, just moving forward at a steady pace. We followed her for what might have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time had stopped meaning anything. And then the fog began to thin. I could see trees more clearly now, see the ground, see that we were on some kind of path. Not a maintained trail, but a worn track through the forest where feet had passed many times before. And suddenly the quality of the air changed. The oppressive wrongness lifted. The trees looked normal again, the right species, the right spacing. "I think we're back," Paige whispered. Lisa stopped walking. She stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, and then she collapsed. We rushed to her, Paige pulling out her medical kit. Lisa was breathing, but unconscious, her skin still cold and wet. I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders while Paige checked her vital signs. "Pulse is weak but steady," Paige said. "She's hypothermic. We need to get her warm and get her out of here." I looked around, trying to orient myself. And I saw it, a trail marker nailed to a tree. The number 19. We were back. We were at campsite 19, and Lisa Martinez was alive. I grabbed my radio, hands shaking as I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Hartley. We have found Lisa Martinez. She's alive but unconscious, showing signs of severe hypothermia. We're at campsite 19. We need immediate medical evacuation." The radio crackled to life immediately, Sarah's voice coming through clear and strong. "Copy that, Hartley. Medical team is en route. ETA 20 minutes. What's her condition?" "Unresponsive, hypothermic, soaking wet. No obvious injuries, but she needs a hospital now." "Understood. Tom and Marcus are 5 minutes from your location. Hold tight." I clipped the radio back and helped Paige wrap Lisa in our emergency blankets. The woman was still unconscious, her breathing shallow but regular. The water continued to drip from her hair and clothes, forming a puddle beneath her, which made no sense. It hadn't rained in 3 days. "Where was she?" Paige asked quietly. "Where the hell was she?" "I don't know. Same place we were, maybe. That wrong forest." "And how did we get back?" "She led us. Somehow she knew the way out." Paige was checking Lisa's pupils with her flashlight. She was repeating something. "The trail ends at the water." "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, we heard crashing through the underbrush. Tom and Marcus burst into the clearing, flashlights sweeping, both breathing hard from running. "You found her," Tom said, dropping to his knees beside us. "Is she okay?" "Alive, hypothermic, unresponsive. We need to keep her warm until the medics arrive." Marcus was already pulling out more emergency blankets from his pack. "Where was she? We've been searching the entire trail. We passed this campsite 20 minutes ago and there was no sign of anyone. I paused, not sure how to explain. "We found her in the woods, off trail." "Off trail where? This whole area has been searched." "I don't know how to explain it, Marcus. We found her. That's what matters." Tom was looking at me with sharp eyes, and I knew he was picking up on the things I wasn't saying. He'd been with me on the Drew Parsons case. He'd seen things in these woods that didn't make sense. "Did you hear the voices?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, we heard them." "So did we. Dozens of them, all calling for help, all coming from directions that didn't make sense." He looked down at Lisa's unconscious form. "She was in there, wasn't she? In that place?" "Yeah, she was." David Martinez came running from where he'd been waiting on the trail. When he saw Lisa, he let out a sound that was half sob, half cry of relief. He dropped down beside her, taking her hand. "Lisa? Baby? Can you hear me? It's David. I'm here." She didn't respond, but her eyelids fluttered slightly. "Is she going to be okay?" David asked, looking up at us with desperate eyes. "The medics are coming," I told him. "They'll take her to the hospital. She needs to be checked out, but she's alive. That's what matters." The medical evacuation team arrived 15 minutes later, hiking in with a stretcher and full emergency gear. They assessed Lisa quickly, started an IV for fluids, wrapped her in heat-retaining blankets, and prepared her for transport. David insisted on going with them, and I didn't have the heart to argue. As they were loading Lisa onto the stretcher, her eyes opened. For just a moment, she looked directly at me with an expression of such profound terror that it made my blood run cold. "Don't let it follow me," she whispered. "Don't let it follow me back." "What?" I leaned closer. "What do you mean? What followed you?" But her eyes had closed again, and she was unconscious once more. The medics carried her away, David trailing behind them, and then it was just the 4 of us rangers standing in the clearing at Campsite 19. "What the hell happened out here?" Marcus finally asked. "And don't give me some bullshit explanation about her getting lost. We all know that's not what this was." I looked at Paige. She nodded slightly, giving me permission to tell them. So I did. I told them everything. About following the boot prints that stopped mid-stride. About the voices coming from multiple directions. About finding ourselves in a forest that wasn't quite right, with a body of water that wasn't the Rogue River. About walking in circles despite following a straight shoreline. About finding Lisa soaking wet and repeating that phrase like a mantra. When I finished, Tom and Marcus were silent for a long moment. "I believe you," Tom finally said. "I didn't want to, but I believe you. Because we experienced something similar. We were searching the trail north of here, and we kept finding things that shouldn't be there. Boot prints appearing in places we'd already checked. The same tree with the same broken branch in 3 different locations. And those voices, Christ, those voices. How many people are lost in there? Marcus asked quietly. How many hikers have wandered into that place and never came back? I don't know, I said. But we heard dozens of voices, maybe more. And Lisa got out. How? I think she'd been there long enough to learn the patterns, long enough to understand how to navigate it. She led us back. Paige had been quiet, staring at the ground where Lisa had been lying. There's water here, she said. A lot of it. More than should have come from one person's wet clothes. She was right. There was a puddle at least 3 feet across, dark and still, reflecting nothing. We should get samples, I said. Document everything. This needs to be reported. Reported to who? Marcus asked. What do we even call this? How do we write a report that says we found a lost hiker in an alternate dimension forest that exists alongside ours? We don't, Tom said firmly. Officially, this was a successful search and rescue. Hiker got disoriented, possibly fell in the river and got hypothermic. We found her and got her medical attention. That's the story. But, I started. No buts, Eliza. You want to write up a report about ghost forests and voices from nowhere? You'll be on desk duty for a year while they evaluate your mental health. We all will. He looked at each of us in turn. What happened here tonight stays between us. We do our jobs, we keep people safe, and we watch for the signs, but we don't make this official. I hated it, but he was right. Who would believe us? What good would it do to have this on record? Fine, I said, unofficial, but we keep notes. We document everything we can, for ourselves if nothing else, because this is going to happen again. We spent the next hour doing exactly that. Taking photos of the boot prints, measuring the water puddle, recording GPS coordinates of every strange occurrence. Then we hiked out together, nobody willing to be alone, sticking to the main trail and checking our GPS every 5 minutes to make sure we were where we thought we were. When we finally reached the trailhead parking lot at 3 a.m., I had never been so grateful to see asphalt and vehicles and electric lights. The real world, solid and normal and making sense. Lisa Martinez spent 3 days in the hospital. Physically, she was fine once they got her warmed up and hydrated. Mentally, that was another story. She had no memory of the 18 hours she'd been missing. The last thing she remembered was leaving camp that morning, saying goodbye to David, starting down the trail. Then nothing until she woke up in the hospital. The doctor said the memory loss was consistent with hypothermia and trauma, the brain protecting itself from whatever happened. David seemed relieved that she couldn't remember. I wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. I visited her once before she was discharged, bringing flowers and asking if she needed anything. She looked small in the hospital bed, fragile in a way she hadn't looked before. There were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there in the photos David had shown us. They said you found me, she said quietly. I don't remember any of it. They said I was lost in the woods for almost a whole day. That's right, you got turned around somehow. It happens to experienced hikers sometimes. But where was I? They said my clothes were soaking wet, but it hadn't rained. They said I had mud on me from places that don't exist on the trail maps. Where was I, Ranger Hartley? I looked at her, at the fear and confusion in her eyes, and I made a decision. You walked off trail, I said gently, got disoriented in the fog, probably fell in the river at some point, which would explain why you were wet. The hypothermia can cause confusion, memory loss, make you walk in circles without realizing it. You're lucky we found you when we did. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see that she knew I was lying, or at least not telling her everything. But she also looked relieved to have a rational explanation, something normal she could hold on to. Thank you, she finally said, for finding me, for bringing me back. That's my job." As I was leaving, she called out one more time. "Ranger Hartley, do you believe in places that shouldn't exist?" I stopped at the door, my hand on the frame. I thought about lying again, about maintaining the official story, but something in her voice told me she needed the truth. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do. I think I was in one of those places. I don't remember it, not really. But I have these dreams. I'm walking in circles in a forest where the trees are too tall and too close together. And I can hear voices, dozens of voices, all lost like me. And there's something behind me, following me, waiting for me to get tired enough to stop walking." She paused, her hands gripping the hospital blanket. "And in my dreams, I know that if I stop, if I rest even for a moment, it will catch me. So I keep walking, round and round and round. And the worst part is I can see you. I can see you and Paige searching for me. I can hear you calling my name. But you're on the other side of something. Like looking through cloudy glass. I'm shouting back, but you can't hear me. And every time I complete a circle, that glass gets a little thicker, a little harder to see through." "It was just hypothermia," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "No, it wasn't, but thank you for saying so." She smiled sadly. "I don't think I'll be going hiking anymore. Not in these forests. Maybe not anywhere." I nodded, started to leave again, but she stopped me one more time. "The water," she said. "In my dreams, I'm always wet, always dripping, like I've been underwater but I can still breathe. Does that mean something?" I thought about the still pool, about Drew Parsons, about that black water that didn't move. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but if you remember anything else, anything at all, call me, please." She nodded, but we both knew she wouldn't. Some things are better left in the dark. 3 days after Lisa was discharged from the hospital, I got a call from David. His voice was shaking when I answered. "She's not sleeping," he said without preamble. "Lisa, she's afraid to sleep. She says every time she closes her eyes, she's back there, walking in circles. She can hear the voices, all those other people calling for help, and she says something's trying to follow her back." "Has she talked to the hospital psychiatrist?" "They prescribed sleeping pills and anti-anxiety medication, but she won't take them. She's afraid that if she sleeps too deeply, she'll wake up back in those woods." "Ranger Hartley, what really happened out there? What did you find her in?" I wanted to tell him. Wanted to explain about the wrong forest and the voices and the geometry that didn't make sense. But what good would it do? It would just give him nightmares too. "She experienced severe trauma and hypothermia," I said, sticking to the script. "Sometimes it takes time for the mind to process that. The dreams should fade. Give her time." But I wasn't sure I believed that, and I don't think David did either. "If anything happens," he said, "if she gets worse, or if... I don't know, just... if anything happens, I'll call you. Please do." He hung up, and I sat at my desk staring at my locked drawer where I kept my real notes about what had happened. I pulled them out and spread them across my desk. Photos of the boot prints. GPS coordinates that didn't match the terrain. Audio recordings of the voices that came from wrong directions. And my own handwritten observations, page after page of them. I started cross-referencing everything with the old case files I'd pulled. The 15 people who'd been found after being missing for more than 12 hours. The 23 who'd never been found at all. And as I worked, a pattern began to emerge. October. Every single case happened in October. Some early in the month, some late, but all of them within that 30-day window when the leaves were changing and the fog rolled in heavy off the river. And the locations. When I plotted them on a map, They formed a rough circle around a 5-mile radius, and at the center of that circle was a section of forest that had no trails, no campsites, no official access. Just dense old growth that nobody went into because there was no reason to. I pulled up satellite imagery of that central area. At first glance, it looked like normal forest. Trees, terrain, nothing unusual. But when I looked closer, I noticed something odd. The trees in that central area were arranged in patterns that seemed too regular, too geometric, like they'd been planted in specific formations. But nobody had planted forests in Rogue River National Park. These were supposed to be virgin old growth, untouched for centuries. I spent hours staring at those satellite images, and the more I looked, the more wrong it seemed. The way the shadows fell between the trees, the way no game trails crossed through that area, the way even the river seemed to bend around it rather than through it. The next day, I requested permission to do a solo survey of that central area. My supervisor, Jim Brennan, looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Why?" he asked. "There's nothing out there. No trails to maintain, no facilities to check. It's just trees." "I want to do a wildlife survey," I lied. "We haven't had updated animal counts for that quadrant in 5 years. It's time." Jim frowned, but he signed off on it. "Take someone with you. You know the rules about solo backcountry work. Paige is available." "Paige put in for emergency leave yesterday. Family situation. She's gone for the next 2 weeks." That stopped me cold. Paige hadn't mentioned anything about family problems. In fact, just the other day she'd seemed fine. But then I thought about how quiet she'd been since the Lisa Martinez case, how she'd been avoiding the section of trail where we'd encountered that wrong forest. "Is she okay?" I asked. "Didn't say, just requested leave and was gone within an hour." Jim looked at me with concern. "Everything all right with you two? You both seem off since that last rescue." "We're fine, just tired. It's been a long season." He didn't look convinced, but didn't push. "Take Marcus with you for the survey, and Eliza, be careful out there." There was something in the way he said it that made me think Jim knew more than he was letting on. Like maybe he'd heard the stories too, seen the patterns, but was too smart or too scared to look too closely. I tried calling Paige that night. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back, but she never did. I told myself she was dealing with her family situation, that she'd reach out when she was ready. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd run, that what we'd experienced in those woods had broken something in her, and she'd decided the only way to deal with it was to get as far away as possible. 3 days later, Marcus and I hiked into the Central Zone. It was early November by then, past the window when things seemed to go wrong, but I couldn't wait. I needed to know what was in that area, needed to understand the pattern. We approached from the east, pushing through dense underbrush where no trail existed. The terrain was rougher than I'd expected, steep ravines and rocky outcrops that made progress slow. After 2 hours of hiking, we'd only covered maybe a mile and a half. "This is brutal," Marcus said, catching his breath as we stopped for water. "No wonder nobody comes out here. It's not worth the effort." But that's what bothered me. The satellite imagery hadn't shown terrain this rough. It had shown relatively flat forest floor, easy walking. Either the satellites were wrong, or something about this place was different in person than it appeared from above. We pushed on, and as we got closer to what my GPS said was the center of the pattern, I started noticing things. Trees that had grown in strange shapes, their trunks twisted and bent like they'd been trying to grow away from something. Areas where the underbrush was completely dead, gray and brittle, despite plenty of water and sunlight. And the silence. That same oppressive, unnatural silence I'd experienced the night we found Lisa. "You feel that?" Marcus asked quietly. Something's wrong here. Yeah, I feel it. We kept going, both of us on edge now, hands near our bear spray even though we both knew bear spray wouldn't help against whatever made this place feel so wrong. And then we found it. Right at the center of the pattern, in a small clearing that shouldn't have existed, there was a pond. Maybe 50 feet across, perfectly circular, the water black as oil, and absolutely still. No ripples, no insects skating across the surface, no signs of life at all. It looked exactly like the body of water Paige and I had found that night. The one that wasn't the Rogue River. "What is that?" Marcus breathed. "I don't know, but I think this is where it happens. This is the center." We approached carefully, and I pulled out my camera, taking dozens of photos. The water was so black and so still, it looked more like polished obsidian than a liquid. And when I looked at it, I couldn't see any reflection. Not the trees around us, not the sky above, not even our own faces when we leaned over it. "There's nothing reflected," Marcus said, stating what we could both see. "Water always reflects something, but this is just black." I knelt at the edge, careful not to touch the water. Up close, I could see that the surface wasn't quite still. There were patterns moving across it, slow swirls and spirals that didn't match any wind or current, like something beneath was stirring, creating movement from below. "We should get samples," I said, pulling out a collection kit. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" I wasn't, but I needed to understand what this was. I pulled on latex gloves, uncapped a sample jar, and slowly, carefully, dipped it into the black water. The moment the jar touched the surface, everything changed. The silence broke. Suddenly I could hear voices, dozens of them, all talking at once, overlapping and echoing. The same voices we'd heard searching for Lisa, all the lost, calling out from wherever they were trapped. And in the water, reflections appeared, not of our forest but of that other place. The wrong forest with trees too tall and too close together. And I could see figures moving through it, people walking in circles, over and over, following paths that went nowhere. I yanked the jar back, and the vision stopped. The voices cut off, the water went still and black again. Marcus had backed up several feet, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I said, my hands shaking as I sealed the sample jar. "But we're leaving, now." We practically ran back the way we'd come, neither of us speaking until we'd put at least a mile between us and that black pond. When we finally stopped to catch our breath, Marcus looked at me with fear in his eyes. "That place," he said. "That's where they go, isn't it? All the missing hikers. That's the doorway, or whatever the hell it is." "I think so." "So, what do we do? Close it off? Post signs? Get it declared a hazard area? And say what? That there's a magic pond that leads to another dimension? They'll think we're crazy." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "So we just let it keep happening? Just let people wander in there and disappear?" "We watch," I said. "We pay attention to the patterns. We try to find people before they reach that area. And if someone goes missing, we know where to look. That's not enough. It's all we can do." We hiked out in silence, both of us processing what we'd seen. I sent the water sample to a lab, telling them I needed a full analysis, every test they could run. When the results came back 2 weeks later, they made no sense. The water contained trace elements that shouldn't exist together. Minerals from different types of rock that weren't found anywhere near Rogue River. And something else, something organic that the lab couldn't identify. "This sample is contaminated," the lab tech told me over the phone. "Or you collected it from multiple sources. These components shouldn't be together." "It's from a single source," I said. "I'm sure of it. then your single source is impossible. This water is from places thousands of miles apart, possibly different geological ages. I don't know how to explain it. I thanked him and hung up. The water was from multiple places, multiple realities maybe. That pond was a collection point, a place where the boundaries between what is and what shouldn't be had worn thin enough to create a passage. That night, lying awake in my cabin, I finally let myself admit what I'd been avoiding since the Lisa Martinez case. This wasn't just a strange phenomenon. This was a feeding ground. That wrong forest, that place where people walked in circles forever, it needed something from the people who wandered into it. Their presence, their movement, their life force maybe. And every October, when the conditions were right, it opened a little wider, reached a little farther, and pulled in new victims. 23 people who'd never been found. 23 people still walking in circles in that impossible forest, still calling for help, still hoping someone would show them the way out. And how many before that? How many before anyone started keeping records? This forest was old, ancient. How many centuries had that black pond been sitting there? How many lost souls had it collected? I tried calling Paige again, still no answer. But this time, when her voicemail picked up, I left a different message. Paige, it's Eliza. I found it. The center. The source. There's a pond, perfectly round. Water that's impossible. I think that's where they all go. Where Lisa went. I need to talk to you about it. Please call me back. She never did. 3 weeks after she'd left on emergency leave, I got word that Paige had resigned. No explanation, no goodbye, just a formal letter submitted through the regional office. Her phone was disconnected. Her apartment in town was empty, forwarding address unknown. She'd run as far and as fast as she could, and I couldn't blame her. Some people can't live with knowing what's really out there, can't function in a world where forests can swallow you whole, and reality has weak spots that lead to places worse than death. I stayed because someone had to. Someone needed to watch that black pond, monitor the patterns, try to intercept hikers before they wandered too close. I couldn't save everyone, but maybe I could save some. And I stayed because, in a way, I was already caught. That night in the wrong forest had changed me, marked me somehow. I'd seen behind the curtain, touched the edges of something vast and incomprehensible, and I couldn't just walk away and pretend it had never happened. Lisa Martinez had asked if I believed in places that shouldn't exist. The truth is, I don't just believe in them anymore. I've been to one. I've walked its paths, heard its voices, felt its pull, and I know I got lucky getting out. Most don't. Most just keep walking, keep calling, keep hoping until they can't anymore. And somewhere in that black water, in that center point where realities thin and merge, they wait, all the lost, trapped in their endless circles, their voices echoing from wrong directions, their boot prints appearing in impossible places. Still waiting, still calling, still hoping someone will hear them and bring them home. Back at the ranger station, I filed my official report. Everything by the book, everything normal, just another successful search and rescue. But I kept my own notes, detailed observations of everything that had happened, stored them in a locked drawer in my desk, and I started noticing patterns. I pulled reports going back 10 years, looking for missing hikers in the Rogue River National Forest area. I found 15 cases where people had gone missing for more than 12 hours before being found alive. All of them reported memory loss. All of them were found soaking wet despite no rain. All of them had difficulty articulating where they'd been. And I found another 23 cases where people had gone missing and never been found. No bodies recovered. No evidence of what happened to them. Just gone. vanished into the forest like they'd never existed. 23 people, walking in circles in that wrong forest, maybe still walking, still calling for help from directions that don't make sense. I thought about Drew Parsons and the still pool, thought about the boot prints leading into water, thought about all the strange things I'd encountered in my years as a ranger that I'd explained away as coincidence or misperception or natural phenomena. The forest has places that don't follow the rules, folds in reality where the geometry goes wrong and people get trapped. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very careful, you can find your way out. But most don't. Most just keep walking in circles until they can't walk anymore. Paige and I stayed partners for another year. We never talked about that night, not directly, but it changed how we worked. We were more careful, more aware, always watching for the signs. When hikers reported hearing voices that didn't make sense, we paid attention. When boot prints appeared in impossible locations, we documented them. When the fog rolled in thick and the forest went too quiet, we got out. Eventually, Paige transferred to a park in Montana, said she needed a change of scenery. I understood. Some people can't keep working in a place once they've seen behind the curtain, once they know what's really out there. I stayed. Someone has to. Someone has to know the signs, know when the forest is reaching out and trying to pull someone in. Someone has to be ready when hikers report voices from the wrong direction, when people go missing on trails that should be impossible to get lost on. I'm still here, still patrolling these trails, still watching and listening. And sometimes, late at night when the fog rolls in off the river and the forest goes silent, I hear them, the voices of the lost, calling from that wrong forest that exists somewhere beside our world. Help me. I can't find the trail. Please. I've been walking for so long. And I wonder how many of them are still in there, still walking in circles, still hoping someone will hear them and lead them back to reality. Lisa Martinez was lucky. She found her way out, or more accurately, she found us and led us out with her. But for every person who makes it back, how many more are trapped in that endless loop, walking and walking through a forest where the rules don't work and the paths don't lead anywhere? I don't have answers. I just have my notes, my observations, and the knowledge that the wilderness is bigger and stranger than any map can show. That there are places where reality thins, where the walls between what is and what shouldn't be become permeable. And I have my nightmares. Dreams where I'm back in that wrong forest, following boot prints that end mid-stride, hearing voices from impossible directions, walking in circles around that black water that reflects nothing. In my dreams, I never find my way out. But I wake up. I wake up in my cabin, in the real world, and I go back to work. Because someone has to watch. Someone has to know. The trail ends at the water, that's what Lisa said. The trail ends at the water. But I think she had it backwards. The trail doesn't end at the water. It goes under the water, down into that black stillness where the lost continue walking, continue calling, continue hoping. And sometimes, on nights when the fog is thick and the forest holds its breath, I think I can see them. Shapes moving between the trees, following paths only they can see, calling from directions that don't exist on any compass. The forest keeps its secrets. The forest keeps its lost. And I keep watching, keep listening, keep hoping I can pull one more person back from that place where the voices come from the wrong direction, and the trails lead in circles and nothing is quite what it should be. Because that's my job. That's what I do. Even if nobody believes me. Even if it's not in any official report. Even if some nights I'm not entirely sure I believe it myself. The voices are real. The place is real. The lost are real. And somewhere out there in the Rogue River National Forest, in the spaces between what is and what shouldn't be, They're still walking, still calling, still waiting for someone to show them the way home. You ever wake up in the woods and know, absolutely know, that something's different? Not just a feeling, but a certainty deep in your bones that the forest you fell asleep in isn't quite the same forest you woke up to. That the trees have shifted when you weren't looking. That the trail has moved when your eyes were closed. I learned that lesson on a cold October morning when I realized the trail markers I'd carefully checked the night before were pointing in completely different directions. And my GPS, reliable military-grade equipment I'd trusted with my life 100 times before, kept insisting we were right back where we'd started, even though we'd been hiking for hours. My name is Miles Garrison, and I've been a park ranger at Rogue River National Forest for 8 years. Before that, I spent 6 years in the Army doing land navigation and terrain mapping, so I know my way around a compass and a GPS unit. I can read maps in my sleep, can orient myself by the stars, can find north with nothing but a watch and the sun. I'm the guy they send when someone gets lost in the backcountry because I don't get lost. Ever. Except that week in October, I did. We both did. And what we found out there in the forest, what we experienced, it's changed how I see these woods, changed how I see reality itself. It started on a Tuesday. My partner for the week was Lorna Pierce, who'd been with the Park Service for about 5 years. She'd transferred in from Olympic National Park up in Washington, brought with her a reputation for being thorough, professional, and unflappable. Lorna was in her early 30s, compact and athletic, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing your job inside and out. She was also one of the best trackers I'd ever worked with. She could look at a broken twig or a disturbed patch of moss and tell you what passed by, when, and in what direction. We were assigned to do a full inspection of the North Boundary Trail, a 15-mile loop that connected several backcountry campsites. It's not a popular trail, too remote for most casual hikers, but it sees enough use that it needs regular maintenance. Our job was to check the trail markers, clear any fallen trees, assess erosion, and document conditions at each campsite. Standard ranger work. Should have taken us 3 days, 2 nights camping out, then back to the station. Should have. We started the hike Tuesday morning around 8 a.m. The weather was perfect, cool, but not cold. Partly cloudy, no rain in the forecast. The trail began at the North Boundary access point marked by a weathered wooden sign and a clear trail marker post with the distinctive Rogue River NF logo. Trail marker number 1. I photographed it, logged the GPS coordinates, and we started walking. The North Boundary Trail winds through dense old-growth forest for the first 5 miles, mostly Douglas fir and western hemlock, with the forest floor covered in a thick carpet of moss and ferns. The river was about a 1/4 mile to our west, close enough that you could hear it if you stopped and listened, but not visible through the trees. Every 1/4 mile there was a trail marker, wooden posts about 4 feet high, painted brown with white arrows and numbers. Standard Forest Service markers that had been in place for decades. We made good time, stopping at each marker to check its condition and verify the GPS coordinates matched what was on our maps. Everything was routine. At marker 12, about 3 miles in, we found a small tree that had fallen across the trail. We cleared it with a folding saw, documented it, moved on. At marker 16, we stopped for lunch, sitting on a fallen log and eating sandwiches while a gray jay watched us hopefully from a nearby branch. "This is one of the easier assignments I've had," Lorna said, checking her GPS. "Good trail, clear markers, no confusion." "Don't jinx it," I replied, but I was smiling. She was right, everything was going smoothly. We reached the first backcountry campsite, designated as Site Alpha, around 3 p.m. It was a nice spot in a small clearing with a fire ring, a bear box for food storage, and a decent flat area for tents. There were signs that someone had camped there recently, maybe a week ago, but everything was clean and properly maintained. "We'll camp here tonight," I said, dropping my pack. "Tomorrow, we hit sites Beta and Charlie, then loop back to the access point by Thursday afternoon." We set up our tents, hung our food in the bear box, and spent the remaining daylight doing a thorough inspection of the site. Everything checked out. As the sun started to set, we made dinner on our camp stoves and sat by the fire ring, though we didn't light a fire. Fire restrictions were in effect due to the dry conditions. That's when I decided to do one more check of the trail markers. Call it thoroughness. Call it habit. But I wanted to make sure the next set of markers leading out of Site Alpha were in good condition before we set out in the morning. "I'm going to check the next few markers," I told Lorna. "Make sure they're clearly visible for tomorrow." "Want company?" "Nah, I'll just be 15 minutes. You can start the hot chocolate." I grabbed my headlamp and started down the trail. Marker 27 was right at the edge of the campsite, pointing northeast toward Site Beta. I checked it, took a photo with the GPS coordinates superimposed on the image like I'd done with all the others. Marker 28 was a quarter-mile up the trail, also pointing northeast. Good condition, clear arrow. Marker 29, same thing. I was about to turn back when I noticed something odd about Marker 30. The post was fine, the number was clear, but the arrow seemed to be faded, like the paint had weathered more than the others. I got closer, shining my light on it. The arrow pointed northeast, same as the others, but something about it bothered me. The angle was slightly off, maybe 5 or 10 degrees. Not enough that a casual hiker would notice, but enough that someone with land nav training could see. I pulled out my compass to check. The marker said northeast, and according to my compass, it was pointing exactly northeast. So, why did it look wrong? I stared at it for another minute, trying to figure out what was bothering me, then decided I was being paranoid. Long day, tired eyes, seeing problems where there weren't any. I headed back to camp. Lorna had hot chocolate ready, and we sat on our camp chairs talking about nothing important. The forest around us was settling into its nighttime rhythm. The birds had gone quiet, replaced by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of some small animal in the underbrush. The temperature was dropping fast, and I was glad for the hot drink. Around 9 p.m. we called it a night. I checked that all our food was secure in the bear box, made sure our tent stakes were solid, and climbed into my sleeping bag. Through the tent fabric, I could hear Lorna moving around in her own tent about 20 feet away, getting settled. I fell asleep quickly, tired from the day's hike. But sometime in the night I woke up, not suddenly, not from a noise or a dream, just that gradual surfacing into consciousness where you're not quite sure why you're awake. I checked my watch, 3:17 a.m., and then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the trail, coming from the direction of Marker 30. Not running, not hesitant, just someone walking at a normal pace, getting closer. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening. The footsteps continued, steady and rhythmic. They passed Marker 29, then 28, getting closer to the campsite. I reached for my flashlight, my hand closing around it, ready to unzip my tent and confront whoever was approaching. The footsteps reached the edge of the campsite, where Marker 27 stood, and then they stopped. Complete silence, not even the sound of breathing. Just the forest holding its breath. I waited, listening so hard my ears rang. 30 seconds, a minute. Nothing. Finally, I unzipped my tent as quietly as I could and looked out. The campsite was empty. Just dark shapes of trees and the vague outline of Lorna's tent across the clearing. No sign of anyone. No light, no movement, no sound. I got out of my tent entirely, shining my flashlight around the campsite. Nothing. No footprints in the soft dirt except our own from earlier. No signs that anyone had been here. "Miles?" Lorna's voice came from her tent. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure. "Thought I heard something. Probably just an animal. You want to check the perimeter?" "Already doing it." I did a complete circuit of the campsite, checking the ground, the bear box, the trail markers. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. But when I got to marker 27, I stopped. Something was different about it. I couldn't put my finger on what at first. The post was the same, the number was the same, the arrow was the same. But when I checked my compass, the arrow that had been pointing northeast earlier was now pointing northwest. A 90-degree difference. I stared at it, checking my compass again, making sure I wasn't reading it wrong. But no, the arrow had definitely moved. Or rather, the arrow was the same, but it was now pointing in a completely different direction. "That's not possible," my rational mind said. "Trail markers don't rotate themselves." But there it was, pointing northwest when it should have been pointing northeast. "Lorna," I called out, "can you come here for a second?" She emerged from her tent, headlamp on, looking concerned. "What's wrong?" "Look at this marker. What direction is it pointing?" She examined it, pulled out her own compass. "Northwest. Why?" "Because when I checked it 6 hours ago, it was pointing northeast." I photographed it. I logged the GPS coordinates. It was definitely pointing northeast. Lorna looked at me, and I could see her trying to decide if I was serious. "Trail markers don't move, Miles. I know that, but look." I pulled out my camera, scrolled to the photo I'd taken. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m. The location data matched where we were standing. And in the photo, clear as day, marker 27 was pointing northeast. Lorna studied the photo, then looked at the marker, then back at the photo. That's not possible." "I know." "Could someone have moved it, changed it while we were sleeping? Who? We haven't seen anyone on this trail. And why would someone come out here in the middle of the night to rotate a trail marker 90 degrees? We stood there in the dark, both of us trying to find a rational explanation. Finally, Lorna said, "Let's check the others, the ones you looked at earlier." We walked up the trail to marker 28. I pulled up my photo from earlier, timestamp 6:51 p.m., showing the marker pointing northeast. The marker in front of us was now pointing due north, a 45-degree shift. Marker 29 had been northeast, now pointed east. Marker 30, the one that had bothered me earlier, now pointed south. South, the complete opposite of where it had been pointing. "This doesn't make sense," Lorna said, and I could hear the edge of fear in her voice. "Markers don't just rotate. Even if someone did this as a prank, how would they know which ones you'd checked? How would they do it so quickly without us hearing?" "I don't know, but we need to document this. Photo every marker, check them against my earlier photos, and GPS everything." We spent the next hour doing exactly that, working our way back toward the access point, checking markers 26, 25, 24. Every single one had rotated, some just a few degrees, some a complete 180. None of them pointed in the direction they had when I'd checked them earlier in the day. By the time we got back to the campsite, it was almost 5 a.m., and the sky was starting to lighten. We sat by our tents, both of us exhausted and unsettled, trying to process what we'd found. "We should report this," Lorna said. "Get a team out here to figure out what's happening." "And tell them what? The trail markers moved by themselves overnight? They'll think we're crazy." "But we have the photos, we have proof." "Proof of what? That the markers are in different positions than they were last night?" Someone will just say we're mistaken about the original positions, or that vandals did it, or that we're having some kind of shared hallucination. Lorna was quiet for a moment. So, what do we do? We continue the survey. We document everything. We see if it happens again tonight. If it does, then we have a pattern. Then we report it. She didn't look happy, but she nodded. Okay. But Miles? I don't like this. Something's wrong with this trail. I know. I don't like it either. We tried to get a couple more hours of sleep, but I don't think either of us managed more than a doze. When we finally gave up and crawled out of our tents around 7 a.m., the morning felt wrong. The quality of the light was off, like we were looking at the world through a slightly tinted lens. And the sounds were different. The birds that should have been starting their morning chorus were silent. We broke camp quickly, neither of us wanting to stay at Site Alpha any longer than necessary. As we shouldered our packs and prepared to head out, I took one last look at marker 27, still pointing northwest, still wrong. Which direction do we follow? Lorna asked. What the marker says now, or what it said last night? It was a good question. If we followed the marker's current direction, we'd head northwest, deeper into the forest away from Site Beta. If we followed the original direction northeast, we'd stay on the planned route. I pulled out my map and GPS unit. According to the GPS, Site Beta is northeast, about 4 miles. We follow the original route, not what the markers say now. Okay, but Miles? What if the markers change again while we're hiking? Then we rely on the GPS. It's not going to lie to us. That's what I thought anyway. We started hiking, keeping a close eye on the markers as we passed them. Each one pointed in strange directions, none of them consistent with the route we were supposed to be following. It was disorienting, like the forest was trying to turn us around, send us in circles. After an hour of hiking, I checked the GPS. We'd covered about 2.5 miles, good pace. Site Beta should be another 1.5 miles ahead. But when I looked at our track log, the line we'd been following on the GPS, something was wrong. The line looped. Not a straight path from Site Alpha toward Site Beta, but a curved loop that bent back on itself, like we'd been walking in a wide circle. That can't be right, I muttered, stopping to examine the GPS more carefully. What's wrong? Lorna asked, coming up beside me. Look at this. According to the track log, we've been walking in a circle. But we've been following a straight trail. We haven't turned back. Lorna pulled out her own GPS unit, compared it to mine. Hers showed the same thing. A looping track that curved back toward where we'd started. Check the coordinates, she said. Where does it say we are right now? I checked. Then I checked again, not believing what I was seeing. It says we're at Site Alpha, right where we started. We both looked around. We were standing on a clear trail in dense forest. No campsite, no clearing, no fire ring. Definitely not Site Alpha, but both our GPS units insisted we were right back where we'd spent the night. This is impossible, Lorna said. GPS doesn't just fail like this. Not both units at the same time showing the same wrong location. I tried to stay calm, tried to think it through rationally. Okay, could be a satellite issue, a solar flare maybe, messing with the signals. We navigate old school, compass and map. I pulled out my compass, held it flat, waited for the needle to settle. It spun slowly, then pointed west. I moved it, tried again, it pointed south. A third time, it pointed east. Miles, Lorna said quietly, look at mine. Her compass was doing the same thing. The needle slowly rotating, never settling on north, just spinning lazily like it couldn't decide which direction was which. Magnetic anomaly, I said, grasping for explanations. There must be a large iron deposit nearby, or maybe old mining equipment buried somewhere. It's throwing off the compasses. Both compasses and the GPS at the same time? She was right to be skeptical. The chances of all our navigation equipment failing simultaneously were astronomically low. But the alternative was that something else was happening, something that broke the laws of physics and logic. We kept hiking, now relying purely on the sun and our sense of direction. The sun was in the east, so we headed northeast, trusting that we'd eventually intersect with Site Beta or reach some landmark we recognized. But after another hour of walking, I started to notice something disturbing. We'd passed the same distinctive tree 3 times, an old Douglas fir with a massive, gnarled branch that forked off the main trunk about 10 feet up. I remembered it specifically because it looked like a giant arm reaching out. "Lorna, stop," I said. "We're going in circles." "What? No, we've been walking straight. I've been watching the sun. Look at that tree, the one with the forked branch. We've passed it 3 times. She looked at the tree, then at me. "You're sure it's the same tree? There are a lot of trees out here that look similar." "I'm sure. Look at the way the bark pattern is here." I pointed to a distinctive patch where the bark had peeled away, revealing the lighter wood underneath. "I noticed it the first time. I've been watching for it." We stood there, both of us realizing what this meant. Despite walking in what should have been a straight line, despite using the sun for navigation, we were somehow walking in a circle. The forest was looping us back on ourselves. "This is like what happened to Lisa Martinez," Lorna said quietly. I'd heard about that case. Every ranger in the forest had. A hiker who'd gone missing for 18 hours, found by 2 rangers who reported strange occurrences. Voices from wrong directions, boot prints that appeared and disappeared. The official report said it was hypothermia-induced confusion, but the unofficial story that circulated among rangers was a lot stranger. "Yeah," I said. "It is. So what do we do?" I thought about it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of these woods, to abandon the survey and hike back to the access point. But we couldn't do that if we couldn't find our way, and something told me that running, panicking, would only make things worse. "We set up a base camp," I said, "right here. We mark this spot clearly, so we'll know if we come back to it. Then we try a different approach. Instead of trying to hike out, we try to understand the pattern, figure out how this place is looping us." Lorna nodded slowly. "Okay. I don't like it, but okay. You're the land nav expert." We dropped our packs and I pulled out surveyor's tape, bright orange plastic that would be visible from a distance. I tied it to the forked tree, then to several other trees in a circle around our position, creating a clearly marked zone. "Now," I said, "we walk a straight line. Dead straight, no matter what. I'll lead, you follow, and we mark trees as we go. If we end up back here, at least we'll know for sure that we're looping." We set off, me in the lead with the surveyor's tape, tying a strip to every 10th tree. Lorna followed, keeping track of how many trees we'd marked. We walked for what felt like 20 minutes, moving in the straightest line I could manage. I counted steps, kept my eyes on a distant point, did everything right, and then I saw orange tape ahead of us. My orange tape, tied to the forked tree that marked our starting point. "No," I said, "that's not possible. We walked straight. I know we walked straight." Lorna looked as shaken as I felt. "Miles, we just marked 43 trees. We had to have covered at least a quarter mile. How are we back at the start?" I looked at the surveyor's tape I'd been unrolling. I'd used maybe 10 feet of it. Should have been 40, 50 feet if we'd marked as many trees as Lorna counted, but somehow we'd looped back after using only 10 feet of tape. "The space is wrong," I said. "The geometry of this place is wrong. We're walking a straight line, but the space itself is curved, looped, like, I struggled to find a comparison, like a Mobius strip. We think we're going forward, but we're actually just traveling along a surface that doubles back on itself. That's not possible. Neither are trail markers that rotate themselves or GPS units that show us in the wrong place or compasses that can't find north. But it's all happening. We stood there in our marked clearing, surrounded by bright orange surveyor's tape, and I felt something I'd never felt in all my years in the wilderness. True, deep fear. Not of animals or weather or injury, but of the forest itself. Of a place that followed rules that didn't make sense, that trapped you in loops you couldn't see or escape. "We're going to die out here, aren't we?" Lorna said quietly. "No," I said with more confidence than I felt. "No, we're not. Someone got out of this. Lisa Martinez got out, which means there's a way. We just have to find it." But as I said it, looking at the orange tape that marked a circle we'd never meant to walk, I wondered if Lisa had really gotten out. Or if she'd just been lucky enough to have someone on the outside who knew how to pull her back. And out here, in this wrong geometry forest where trails looped and markers lied, there was no one on the outside. Just us. Trapped in a space that didn't follow the rules. Just us, and whatever had changed the markers in the night. We spent the next hour trying different approaches, walking in a spiral pattern, thinking maybe we could expand outward. We ended up back at the forked tree, trying to follow the river by sound, heading toward what we thought was west. We ended up back at the forked tree, even trying to walk backwards, thinking maybe the loop only worked in one direction. Still ended up at the forked tree. Each time we returned, the orange surveyor's tape mocked us, proof that we weren't making progress, just spinning in place like hamsters in a wheel we couldn't see. "There has to be a logic to it," I said, forcing myself to stay analytical, to treat this like a problem to solve rather than a nightmare to panic about. Loops have patterns. Even chaotic systems have underlying structures. Miles, I appreciate the rational approach, but I don't think this is a normal navigational problem. Lorna was sitting on her pack, looking exhausted. This is something else. Something wrong. Wrong how? I don't know, but did you notice the air? I stopped and paid attention. She was right. The air was still, completely still. No wind, no breeze, not even the tiny movements you normally feel in a forest. And the light was wrong too, like it had been that morning. It wasn't getting brighter even though it should have been approaching noon. If anything, it seemed to be getting dimmer, like the sun was setting instead of rising. "What time is it?" I asked. Lorna checked her watch. "According to this, 9:43 a.m., but it feels later. Feels like late afternoon." I checked my own watch. It also said 9:43, but when I pulled out my phone to verify, it showed 3:07 p.m. And when I checked again, it showed 9:43 a.m. and then 11:28 a.m. The time kept changing, flickering between different values like the phone couldn't decide what time it actually was. "Time's not working right either," I said. "Look at this." I showed her my phone's constantly changing clock. She checked hers with the same result. "Okay," she said, and I could hear the edge of panic in her voice now. "Okay, Miles, this is really bad. This isn't just weird magnetic fields or GPS glitches. This is fundamental. Space and time are not working properly in this area." She was right, but hearing it said out loud made it more real, more terrifying. "We need to stay calm," I said, as much to myself as to her. "Panic is what kills people in survival situations. We stay calm, we think, we figure this out. Figure what out? How do you navigate when space loops back on itself and time won't stay consistent? This isn't a survival situation, Miles. This is something else. This is... She trailed off, looking around at the forest. This is a place that shouldn't exist. I couldn't argue with that, but I also couldn't accept it. I'd been trained to deal with impossible situations, to find solutions when there didn't seem to be any. There had to be a way out. Lisa Martinez got out, I said. That means there's a way. We just need to think about how. Maybe she got out because someone came for her. Someone from outside this, whatever this is. So, we wait. We conserve energy, we ration our supplies, and we wait for someone to realize we're missing and send a search party. When are we due back? Thursday afternoon. And today is... She checked her watch, which still, unhelpfully, said 9:43. We left Monday morning, spent Monday night at Site Alpha, so today is Tuesday, which means no one's going to start looking for us until Thursday night at the earliest. We've got 2 days minimum before anyone realizes we're missing. 2 days. In a place where space looped and time stuttered and our navigation equipment was useless. 2 days before help would even start looking. And even then, how would they find us if we were trapped in some kind of pocket dimension that didn't follow normal geography? We have enough food and water for 3 days, I said. 4 if we're careful. We can last until help arrives. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. If time wasn't working properly here, what did 3 days even mean? What if an hour in here was a day outside? Or a day in here was an hour outside? We could be stuck here for what felt like weeks while only hours passed in the real world. Or vice versa. I need to try something, Lorna said suddenly. She stood up, walked to the edge of our taped clearing, and shouted at the top of her lungs. Hello, can anyone hear us? We're rangers. We're lost. We need help. Her voice echoed through the forest, bouncing between the trees. And then, from somewhere distant, we heard a response. Hello? Rangers? Where are you? It was a man's voice, sounding relieved, hopeful, coming from the direction we'd marked as northeast. Here, Lorna shouted back. We're here. Follow the sound of our voices. We waited, listening. I could hear footsteps, definitely human footsteps, coming closer through the underbrush. Keep calling, the voice said. I'm coming toward you. Over here, I yelled. We're in a clearing with orange tape. The footsteps got closer and closer. And then they stopped, right at the edge of our clearing. But there was no one there. The forest was empty. Hello? The voice called again. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Where are you? We're right here, Lorna screamed. In the clearing, right in front of you. I don't see a clearing, the voice said, and it was starting to sound frustrated. Just forest. Are you sure you're... The voice cut off mid-sentence. The footsteps started again, but this time moving away, getting quieter. Wait, I shouted. Don't leave. Come back. But the footsteps faded into the distance and the voice didn't respond again. Lorna looked at me, her eyes wide. He was right there, right at the edge of our clearing. How could he not see us? I don't know. Maybe... I tried to think it through. Maybe we're in the same physical space but somehow separated. Like we're on different frequencies or something. That doesn't even make sense. None of this makes sense. But we're here, wherever here is. And he was there, wherever there is. And even though we were in the same place, we couldn't see each other. I walked to the edge of the clearing where I'd heard the footsteps. The undergrowth was undisturbed. No boot prints, no broken branches, no signs that anyone had been there. Miles, Lorna said quietly. What if that wasn't a real person? What if it was something else? Like the voices Eliza and Paige heard during the Lisa Martinez search? I'd heard about that too, the unofficial version. Voices calling from wrong directions. Voices that moved. Voices that might not have been human at all. If that was something trying to lure us, it didn't work, I said. We stayed put. Yeah, but what if next time we don't? What if it sounds like someone we know, or someone in danger? What if it sounds like the rescue team? She had a point. If we heard what sounded like rangers calling for us, would we be able to resist following the voices? Especially if we were desperate, running out of food, losing hope? We make a rule, I said. No matter what we hear, no matter how convincing it sounds, we don't leave this clearing unless we can see the person with our own eyes. Deal? Deal. We sat down again, back to back, watching the forest in different directions. The light continued to stay in that strange twilight state, neither brightening nor fully darkening. My watch alternated between 9:43 and 3:17, occasionally jumping to other times before settling back into that pattern. Tell me about the Lisa Martinez case, I said, needing to think about something other than our situation. You know more about it than I do, right? You talked to Eliza? A little, Lorna said. She didn't want to discuss it much. But what I gathered is that Lisa walked off the trail and ended up somewhere else. Somewhere similar to this, probably. A place where normal navigation doesn't work. Eliza and Paige found her by essentially following her into that wrong space, and then Lisa somehow led them back out. How? Eliza didn't say, or couldn't explain. But the key thing is Lisa got back because she figured out how to navigate that space. There's a logic to it, even if it's not a logic we understand. I thought about that. If there was a logic, a pattern, then there was a way to learn it, to understand how this wrong geometry forest worked, and use that understanding to escape. Okay, I said. So, we need to stop trying to navigate like this is normal space. We need to figure out the rules here. And how do we do that? By observing, by experimenting, by treating this like a scientific problem. For the next several hours, or what felt like several hours, time had become meaningless. We tried different experiments. We threw rocks in different directions and watched where they landed. Sometimes they fell normally. Sometimes they seemed to curve in mid-air, following paths that didn't match the ballistic arc they should have followed. We tried walking while keeping our eyes closed, thinking maybe visual input was what made the space loop. We still ended up back at the forked tree. We tried walking while holding hands, thinking maybe we could anchor each other, still looped back. We tried marking our trail more extensively, using not just surveyor's tape but also scratching arrows into tree bark, breaking branches in specific patterns, anything that would leave a clear trace of our path. And when we returned to the starting point, we'd look back and see our markings, our arrows, all pointing toward the clearing, like we'd been walking toward it all along, even though we'd been trying to walk away. It's adaptive, Lorna said, studying the pattern of our markings. The space adapts. It changes to keep us looped. Look at this arrow I carved. I carved it pointing away from the clearing toward what I thought was northeast. Now it's pointing back toward the clearing. The tree didn't rotate, the arrow didn't move, but somehow the direction it's pointing has changed. She was right. It was like the forest was rewriting our trail markers, just like it had rewritten the official trail markers the night before. Anything we used to navigate, anything we tried to use as a fixed reference point, the forest changed. So, how do we navigate without reference points? I asked. How do we find a direction if every direction just leads back here? Lorna was quiet for a long time, thinking. Then she said, "What if we're asking the wrong question? What if it's not about finding a direction, but about finding a condition? What do you mean? Think about it. We're not physically trapped. We can walk freely. The space loops us, but it doesn't physically prevent us from moving. So, what if the loop is conditional? What if there's something we need to do or be or understand before the loop releases us? Like a puzzle or a test. Yeah, exactly like that. It sounded insane, but it made more sense than anything else we'd tried. If this place operated on different rules, maybe those rules included conditions that needed to be met before it would let you leave. Okay, I said. So, what's the condition? What does it want from us? I don't know, but let's think about the Lisa Martinez case again. She was stuck for 18 hours, walking in circles just like us, and then suddenly she wasn't. She found her way back, or something released her. What changed? Eliza and Paige entered the wrong space to find her. Right. So maybe the condition is that someone from outside has to come in. Maybe you can't escape on your own. You need someone else to pull you out. But if that's true, we're screwed until Thursday when someone realizes we're missing. Maybe. Or maybe the condition is different for rangers. We're different from lost hikers. We know the forest. We're trained. Maybe that makes a difference. I wasn't sure I believed it, but I didn't have better ideas. So we tried a new approach. Instead of trying to walk out, we started walking in, walking toward what felt like the center of the loop, the heart of whatever this wrong space was. It felt counterintuitive, terrifying even, but we moved forward, marking our trail as we went, heading toward what my instincts said was the middle. And for the first time since we'd started looping, something different happened. The forest changed. Not abruptly, but gradually. The trees got taller, older, more twisted. The moss got thicker, luminous almost, glowing with a faint greenish light that had no obvious source. And the air got heavier, denser, like we were descending into water. "It's working," Lorna whispered. "We're going somewhere different." Yeah, question is that a good thing? We kept walking, and the changes became more pronounced. The trees were wrong now, not just tall, but geometrically impossible. Their trunks spiraling in ways that hurt to look at. The ground felt soft, spongy, like it was breathing beneath our feet, and the light, that sourceless green glow, was getting brighter. Then we found it. In a clearing that definitely hadn't been there before, we found what looked like the source. A tree, but not like any tree I'd ever seen. It was massive, easily 30 feet across at the base, but only about 20 feet tall, as if it had grown outward instead of upward. Its bark was covered in what looked like eyes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one about the size of a quarter, all closed. And beneath it, arranged in a perfect circle, were trail markers. Not Forest Service markers, but older ones. Handmade wooden posts with carved symbols instead of painted arrows. There were at least 50 of them, maybe more, all pointing toward the tree. "What the hell is this?" Lorna breathed. "I think," I said slowly, "this is what's been changing our markers. This is the center, the source of the loop." We approached carefully, and as we got closer I could see that the eye-like patterns on the bark weren't patterns at all. They were actual eyes, or something very much like eyes. Closed, but definitely organic with tiny lids and lashes. "We shouldn't touch it," Lorna said. Agreed. But as we stood there, studying this impossible tree with its hundreds of closed eyes and its circle of markers, one of the eyes opened. It was yellow, the iris bright gold with a vertical slit pupil like a cat's. And it was looking directly at me. Then another eye opened, and another. All across the massive trunk, eyes were opening, all of them turning to focus on us. Hundreds of eyes, all watching. I felt the weight of their gaze, oppressive and ancient and aware. This wasn't a plant. This was something alive, something intelligent, something that had been here long before humans ever walked these forests. And it had been playing with us, I realized. The looping, the changed markers, the stuttering time. It wasn't malicious, it was curious, testing us, seeing how we'd react, watching us try to solve its maze. "We see you," I said, not sure what else to do. "We're rangers. We're supposed to be here on this land. We're not trespassing." The eyes blinked, all of them in perfect synchronization, and then I heard a voice, not out loud but inside my head, like a thought that wasn't my own. "Everything trespasses. All who walk make circles. The forest remembers." "What do you want from us?" Lorna asked, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "To see if you know the way. To see if you remember." "Remember what?" "That the paths choose, not you." The eyes began to close, one by one, starting from the top of the tree and cascading down. As each eye closed, I felt the weight of attention lift slightly, and as the last eye closed, the forest changed again. The green glow faded. The impossible geometry of the trees resolved into normal shapes, and I could feel it, like a rubber band snapping, the loop releasing. "Check your GPS," I told Lorna. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and her eyes went wide. "It's working. It shows us at... God, Miles, we're only about 100 yards from Site Beta. We walked right past it, probably multiple times." I checked my own GPS. She was right. Site Beta was northeast, just a short walk away, and when I looked at our track log, it showed exactly what we'd experienced. A tight loop that circled the same area over and over, dozens of overlapping lines all centered on this clearing where the tree stood. "We're free," I said. "It let us go. Why? What changed?" "We came to the center. We saw it. We acknowledged it." I looked back at the tree, all its eyes now closed, looking like nothing more than unusual bark patterns. I think that's what it wanted, to be seen, to be recognized. We left the clearing quickly, neither of us wanting to stay near that tree any longer than necessary. And this time, when we walked, the forest didn't loop us. We moved in a straight line, the GPS tracking us properly, and within 10 minutes we emerged into the clearing that held Site Beta. It looked normal, mundane even. Fire ring, bear box, flat tent sites, like nothing had happened. But when we checked the GPS coordinates, they matched perfectly. We were where we were supposed to be. "Miles," Lorna said, checking her watch. "Look at the time." I checked mine. It showed 10:15 a.m., just 32 minutes after we'd started looping. According to the watch, our entire ordeal in that wrong space had taken half an hour. But my phone, when I checked it, showed 6:47 p.m., almost 9 hours later. "Which time is real?" Lorna asked. "I don't know. Maybe both. Maybe neither." We set up camp at Site Beta, neither of us wanting to hike anymore that day, even though we'd technically only been walking for half an hour according to our watches. We were exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained from the experience. As the sun set, actually set this time, moving predictably from west to east, we sat by our tents and talked about what to do. "We need to report this," Lorna said. "Report what? That we found a tree with eyes that trapped us in a spatial loop? They'll never believe it. We have the GPS logs. We have the photos of the trail markers changing position. We have evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Malfunctioning equipment. Our own confusion." "Lorna, we don't even know what happened. How can we report it?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, This is what happened to Lisa Martinez, isn't it? And to Drew Parsons, and to all the others. They found this place, this thing, and it trapped them until it decided to let them go, or until it didn't. Yeah, I think so. So we're not the first, and we won't be the last. So we have to warn people. How? Put up signs saying, "Beware of the reality-bending tree"? I don't know, Miles, but we can't just pretend this didn't happen. She was right. But I also knew that any official report would be dismissed, or worse. Rangers who reported impossible things didn't stay rangers for long. We'd be on desk duty while they evaluated our mental health, and meanwhile that thing in the forest would keep trapping people, keep looping them until it got bored or curious enough to let them go. If it let them go at all. We decided to finish the survey, to continue on to Site Charlie, and complete our loop back to the access point like we were supposed to. But we took a different road, one that avoided going anywhere near the clearing with the tree. And we watched the trail markers carefully, photographing each one, checking them against our earlier photos, documenting everything. They were all back in their correct positions. Every single marker pointed the right direction, matching what they'd shown on our first day. Like the tree's attention had moved elsewhere, like it was no longer interested in playing with us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching. That all those eyes were still there, just closed, still aware of every step we took through its forest. We reached Site Charlie by late afternoon, the real late afternoon this time, with the sun in the right position and our watches showing times that matched our phones. Everything seemed normal, predictable, following the rules. But I couldn't relax. Kept checking over my shoulder, kept expecting the forest to loop us again. Lorna was quieter than usual, processing what we'd experienced. As we set up our tents, she said, "Do you think it's still there? That tree?" "Yeah, I think it's always been there. Probably been there for centuries. How many people do you think it's caught? How many are still walking in circles somewhere, trapped in its loops?" I didn't want to think about that, but I had been thinking about it. Couldn't stop thinking about it. Lisa Martinez had been trapped for 18 hours. We'd been trapped for, depending on which clock you believed, either 30 minutes or 9 hours. But what about the ones who never came back? What about the 23 unsolved missing persons cases Eliza had found? Were they still out there, still walking, still hoping? "I don't know," I said. "But I don't think we can help them. I think once you're in deep enough, once the tree decides to keep you, there's no getting out." "That's a horrible thought." "Yeah." We cooked dinner on our camp stoves, neither of us wanting to build a fire even though we were allowed to. Something about fire felt wrong after what we'd experienced, like it might attract attention we didn't want. We ate quickly, barely tasting the freeze-dried meals, just going through the motions. As darkness fell, I pulled out my notebook and started writing everything down. Every detail I could remember about the tree, about the loop, about the feeling of being trapped in wrong geometry space. Not for any official report, but for myself, so I wouldn't forget. So I could look back on it later and verify that it had really happened. "Miles," Lorna said suddenly, "look at marker 36. I looked up. She was pointing to the trail marker at the edge of Site Charlie, the one that should point southeast toward the next section of trail. In the beam of her flashlight, I could see that the arrow was moving. Not quickly, not spinning, just slowly rotating counterclockwise. As we watched, it moved maybe 10 degrees, then stopped, then moved another 5 degrees. "It's still happening," she whispered. "Even here. Even now." I stood up, walked to the marker, examined it closely. The post was solid. The arrow was firmly attached. There was no way it could be rotating on its own. But it was moving anyway, defying physics, defying logic. And as I watched, another eye appeared on the post. Just one, small and golden, blinking slowly at me from the wood itself. You saw, you remembered. Now, you carry it. The voice in my head again, that thought that wasn't mine. What do you want? I asked out loud. To be known, to be walked. All paths lead through me. We're leaving tomorrow. We're finishing our survey and we're leaving. Leaving is walking. Walking is mine. You cannot leave without leaving through me. The eye closed. The marker stopped moving, its arrow now pointing northeast instead of southeast, pointing back toward where the tree was. No, I said firmly. We're not going back there. We're following the trail to the access point. That's the route we're taking. Silence from the marker. The eye didn't reappear, but I could feel it. That weight of attention, that sense of being watched by something vast and patient. I walked back to Lorna. We need to leave tonight. What? Miles, it's dark. We can't navigate in the dark, especially not after what we've been through. That thing is still playing with us, still trying to loop us back. If we stay until morning, I'm not sure we'll be able to leave. It'll trap us again, but this time it might not let us go. She looked at the marker, at the closed eye that was still faintly visible on the wood. Okay. We pack up and we hike out, but we need to be careful. No mistakes. We broke camp as quickly as we could, stuffing gear into packs without worrying about organization. I pulled out a backup GPS unit I kept in my pack, the kind with its own internal maps, not dependent on satellite. If the space started looping us again, maybe the internal maps would stay consistent even if the physical space didn't. We started hiking at 9 p.m., using our headlamps, moving carefully but quickly. The trail was clear, well marked, should have been easy to follow, but I kept checking the GPS obsessively, making sure we were making forward progress, making sure we weren't looping back. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. We covered maybe 2 miles, following the trail as it wound through the forest toward the access point. The markers we passed all pointed in the correct directions. The GPS showed us moving in a straight line. Everything was working. But then Lorna stopped abruptly. Miles, look. Ahead of us on the trail, illuminated in our headlamp beams, was orange surveyor's tape. My orange surveyor's tape, the strips I'd tied yesterday when we were trying to escape the loop. That's not possible, I said. That tape is miles from here. We left it at that clearing with the forked tree. Unless we're back at that clearing. I checked the GPS. It showed us as still on the trail 2 miles from Site Charlie, 4 miles from the access point. Not looping, not at the forked tree clearing, but the tape was there, unmistakable, tied to the trees in the exact pattern I'd used. It's moving the tape, Lorna said, or copying it, trying to make us think we're looping so we'll panic and make mistakes. Or maybe we are looping and the GPS is lying. We stood there, both of us trying to decide what to trust. Our eyes, which showed orange tape that shouldn't be there, or the GPS, which showed us on the correct path. We keep going, I decided. Straight ahead, we don't stop, we don't second guess. We trust the GPS and we keep moving. We walked past the surveyor's tape, and as we did, I could have sworn I heard that voice again, laughing, a sound like wind through leaves and creaking wood. You trust paths. Paths trust me. The next hour was the longest of my life. Every few hundred yards we'd see something that shouldn't be there. The forked tree appearing beside the trail even though we should have been miles from it. Trail markers with eyes watching us from the wood. Our own footprints in the mud, fresh and clear, heading back the way we'd come even though we were the only ones on this trail. But the GPS kept showing us moving forward, kept showing us getting closer to the access point. So we kept walking, kept trusting the electronic compass even though everything else said we were going in circles. And finally, around midnight according to my watch, though my phone said it was 3:17 p.m. again, we saw lights ahead. Electric lights, not natural, coming from the access point parking lot. "We made it," Lorna breathed. "Oh, thank God we made it." We practically ran the last 100 yards, bursting out of the trailhead onto the asphalt of the parking lot. Our truck was there, exactly where we'd left it. The access point sign was there. Solid and normal and mundane. We were back in the real world, the world where space worked properly and time moved forward and trees didn't have eyes. I leaned against the truck, my legs shaking, suddenly aware of how terrified I'd been. We'd made it. We'd walked through that thing's territory and we'd made it out. But as Lorna unlocked the truck and we threw our packs in the back, I noticed something on the hood. A leaf, fresh and green, even though it was October and all the leaves should have been turning. I picked it up, examined it in the parking lot light. It wasn't from any tree I recognized. The shape was wrong. The veins ran in impossible patterns. And when I turned it over, there was an eye on the underside, golden and cat-like, blinking slowly. You carried it out. Now it knows the way. I dropped the leaf immediately, watched it fall to the asphalt. The eye closed, the leaf crumbled, turning to dust that blew away in a wind I couldn't feel. "Miles?" Lorna was in the truck, looking at me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine. Let's get out of here." We drove back to the ranger station in silence, neither of us wanting to talk about what had happened. Both of us just grateful to be in a vehicle, moving on a road that went in predictable directions. When we arrived, it was just after 1 a.m. We filed brief reports saying we'd completed the survey, that all markers were in acceptable condition, that sites Alpha, Beta, and Charlie were properly maintained. We didn't mention the tree, didn't mention the loops, didn't mention the eyes or the voice or the way space had twisted around us. What would we say? How would we explain it? I went home, took a shower, tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hundreds of eyes on that massive trunk, all watching me, all blinking in unison. The next morning, I called Eliza. She was the only person who might understand, who'd experienced something similar. "Miles?" She sounded surprised to hear from me. "Everything okay?" "Not really. I need to talk to you about something. Something that happened during our survey." There was a pause. "What kind of something?" "The kind that doesn't make sense. The kind that changes trail markers and loops space and has eyes." Another pause, longer this time. "Come to my office. 1 hour. Don't talk to anyone else about this first." I met her at the ranger station, in her small office at the back where we had privacy. She listened, without interrupting, as I told her everything. The markers that rotated, the GPS that showed us looping, the tree with hundreds of eyes, the voice in our heads, the way we'd escaped by going to the center instead of trying to run. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, just staring at her desk. Finally, she said, "I found something similar. A black pond, perfectly circular, in the center of the area where Lisa Martinez was lost. Water that reflected things that weren't there, that showed places that don't exist. I think it's the same thing you found, just a different form." "So there are multiple, what? Entities? Phenomena?" "I don't think they're multiple. I think it's one thing, one intelligence, and it's spread throughout the forest, like a network. The pond is a node. Your tree is a node. Maybe there are others. What is it?" "I don't know. Something old. Something that was here before humans, before the park, maybe before the forest itself. And it's still here, still aware, still playing with us. Playing? That's what it feels like, doesn't it? Like a cat playing with mice. It traps us, watches how we react, and then lets us go if we're interesting enough. If we're not, she trailed off, then we stay trapped forever. Maybe. I've been researching the missing persons cases. I found patterns. All the disappearances happen in October, all within a certain radius, all in areas where the terrain has unusual features. Circular clearings, geometric arrangements of trees, water that shouldn't be there. So, how do we stop it? How do we protect people? I don't know if we can, Eliza said. It's too big, too spread out. We can try to warn people, but what do we say? Don't hike in October because there's a reality-bending entity in the forest that likes to trap people in spatial loops. They'll think we're crazy. So we just let it keep happening. We watch, we document. We try to recognize the signs and intervene when we can. We look for patterns in when and where it's active, and we hope that by understanding it better, we can learn how to protect people from it. It wasn't enough. It felt like surrender. But it was all we could do. I spent the next week going through all my notes, all my photos, creating a detailed map of every strange occurrence we'd experienced. I cross-referenced it with Eliza's data from the Lisa Martinez case and the other disappearances. And a pattern emerged. The active zones formed a rough circle, about 10 miles in diameter. In the center of that circle was an area marked on no official maps, a blank space that surveys had somehow missed or avoided. And when I pulled up satellite imagery of that central area, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The trees there grew in a spiral pattern, not a natural spiral, but a perfect mathematical spiral, like a nautilus shell or a galaxy. Hundreds of trees, all arranged in this precise geometric form. And at the very center was a dark spot, too dark for the satellite to penetrate, like it was absorbing light instead of reflecting it. That was the heart, the source, the central node of whatever this thing was. "We can't go there," Eliza said when I showed her the satellite images. "Whatever's at the center of that spiral, it's the main body. The tree you found, the pond I found, those are just extensions, fingers reaching out. But the center, that's the head, that's where it really is. So, what happens if someone wanders into that area?" "I don't know. But I don't think they come back. That might be where all the missing people are. Not walking in loops on the periphery, but trapped at the center, in whatever that dark spot is." I thought about Drew Parsons, about Lisa Martinez, about all the others. Thought about how we'd only escaped because the tree had let us go, because we'd found the center of its loop and acknowledged it. But what if we'd been at the real center, the spiral center? Would it have let us go? Or would we be there still, trapped in darkness that absorbed light, walking circles around something too vast and old to comprehend? I don't know, and I hope I never find out. Lorna put in for a transfer 3 weeks later. Said she needed a change of scenery, wanted to try working in a desert park where she could see for miles in every direction, where there were no trees with eyes, no loops in space, no ancient things playing games with human minds. I understood. Part of me wanted to transfer too, but someone needed to stay, needed to watch, needed to recognize the signs when that thing started getting active again. So I stayed. I'm still here, still patrolling these trails, still checking markers and GPS coordinates and watching for the telltale signs. The markers that rotate, the spaces that loop, the eyes that appear on wood and stone and watch you with golden, cat-like awareness. October is the worst month. That's when it's most active, when the conditions are right for whatever process or purpose it has. I spend October on high alert, tracking every missing person report, every confused hiker, every strange occurrence. Sometimes I can intervene. Sometimes I can find people before they get too deep, before the loops trap them completely. I've pulled 3 hikers out of suspicious areas this year, gotten them back to safety before they even realized anything was wrong. But sometimes I'm too late. Sometimes I arrive to find just boot prints that end mid-stride, or campsites with fires still warm but no people, or trails that loop back on themselves in ways that maps say shouldn't be possible. And on those nights, when I'm alone in my cabin, I think about that tree, about its hundreds of eyes, all closed but still watching, still aware, about the voice that said you carried it out. Now it knows the way, because that's what scares me most. Not that it's here in the forest, trapping people who wander into its territory. That's bad enough. But what if I did carry something out? What if by acknowledging it, by seeing it, by walking through its loops and escaping, I created a connection, a path? What if it can follow that path? What if it can reach beyond the forest, beyond the circle of its influence, into the world where we think we're safe? I check my mirrors constantly now, looking for eyes that shouldn't be there, looking for spaces that bend wrong, for paths that loop when they should be straight. So far, nothing. So far, it seems content to stay in its forest, to play its games with hikers who stumble into its territory. But I remember what it said, all paths lead through me, and I wonder if that's true. If every trail, every road, every journey eventually loops back to something vast and old and aware. If we're all just walking circles without realizing it, following paths that were chosen for us by things that were here first and will be here long after we're gone. I don't have answers. I just have my maps and my GPS and my growing collection of photographs showing trail markers that point in impossible directions. Evidence that something is wrong with this forest, with this reality, with the space itself. And every October, when the leaves start to turn and the fog rolls in thick off the river, I feel it watching. All those eyes, all that ancient awareness waiting patiently for the next person to wander into its territory, to walk its loops, to see what it wants to show them. Some make it out. Most don't. And I'm still trying to understand why. What's the difference between the ones who escape and the ones who stay trapped forever? Is it luck, intelligence, some quality that makes you interesting enough to release? Or is it simpler than that? Maybe everyone gets out eventually. Maybe Lisa Martinez and I and Lorna and all the others who escaped are just the first phase. Maybe we're the ones who carried it out, who gave it pathways into the wider world. And maybe the ones who are still trapped, still walking in circles, maybe they're the lucky ones, because they never had to carry it with them, never had to wonder if the path ahead loops back on itself, never had to check every shadow for golden eyes watching from impossible places. I'm still here, still watching, still trying to understand. But some nights, when the wind sounds like voices and the trees creak like they're shifting position, I wonder if I'm the one being watched. If I'm the one still trapped in a loop I can't see. If I'm still walking in circles around something I never escaped from at all. The trail that changed at night changed more than just directions. It changed us. It showed us that the world is bigger and stranger than we thought. That there are things in these forests that don't follow our rules, don't care about our maps, don't recognize our authority as rangers or our claim to this land. This was their forest first. Is their forest still, and we're just visitors, walking paths we didn't choose, following markers that point where they want us to go, moving in circles we can't see, until they decide to let us go. If they decide to let us go.